I think doing nothing for people is harming them. We should be trying to really focus on people's health throughout their life course, not only after they get some ICD code, because once they get really sick, it's really hard to fix them. Not only is it about preventing disease, it's about optimizing performance.
Dr. Brian Kennedy holds a PhD in biology from MIT and is currently a distinguished professor of biochemistry and physiology at the National University of Singapore, where he directs the Center for Healthy Longevity. He has published over 240 scientific manuscripts, and his current work spans biological age testing with lineage, human trials of rapamycin, and translating longevity science into real interventions for real people.
When it comes to taking supplements, it's really about finding the right combinations that work for you, and there isn't a one-size-fits-all. For activating autophagy, one of the best markers is whether you're in ketogenesis or not, and you can measure that. That's different for different people. For some people, it's 16 hours or more of fasting. Other people can do 12-12, and they can activate ketogenesis.
How much protein do you think is optimal?
I think a lot depends on how much you exercise. High carb, low protein is associated with longevity, not high protein, low carb. The second thing is that what we're really defining is the optimal diet for sedentary animals. But a lot of humans are sedentary. And so if you're eating a lot of protein and you have a lot of circulating amino acids and you're not using those, then that's a risk factor for cardiovascular disease and kidney disease.
Okay, today I am so excited about our guest. He has come a very far way, and he is Dr. Brian Kennedy. He is one of the most respected figures in the science of aging. He has spent his entire career dedicated to answering the questions of why we age and what we can do about it. Dr. Brian Kennedy holds a PhD in biology from MIT and is currently a distinguished professor of biochemistry and physiology at the National University of Singapore, where he directs both the Center for Healthy Longevity and the Asian Center for Reproductive Longevity and Equality. Before that, he served as president and CEO of the Buck Institute for Aging, the world's first independent research institution focused entirely on aging. He has published over 240 scientific manuscripts, and his current work spans biological age testing with lineage, human trials of rapamycin, and translating longevity science into real interventions for real people. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. It's great.
I'm so excited to chat with you. You've dedicated your whole life to this, essentially, right? Tell us a little bit about your backstory. Like, you got started and then went into what?
Yeah, it was a little bit unprepared, but when I went to graduate school at MIT, I wanted to do something different and out there in terms of research. And the opportunity to study aging was something that, I couldn't understand it. We had something that affects everybody on Earth, and very few people were doing research on it. It was just thought of as a natural process and not much you can do about it. But we decided to start working in yeast cells, and this was in Lenny Guarenti's lab. And not because we thought what we would learn in yeast cells would apply to humans necessarily, but we thought a simple cell system might be a good way to understand the principles of aging, and then we could apply those principles. Turns out that we found the Sirtuin pathway, we found the mTOR pathway using those simple yeast cells. And what we learned is that there's remarkable conservation of pathways that govern aging across a wide range of species. And that's important because it means you can study animal models and even invertebrate models to understand the aging process.
And mTOR and Sirtuins, for anyone that's listening that doesn't know what that is, would you give a little bit of description?
So Sirtuins are a family of protein deacetylases, and they've been linked to aging. So if you have increased SIRT1 or SIRT6 activity, it extends health span and lifespan in preclinical models, even up to mice. And there are a lot of natural products that are thought to activate those deacetylases, and people are taking those like NAD precursors, for example. And the mTOR pathway is really intimately linked to, I think, calorie restriction. It's a kinase pathway that when it gets activated by nutrients, it tells the cells to grow and divide. And when you starve cells or reduce their nutrient exposure, it turns down those proliferation pathways and turns up stress response pathways like autophagy. And that protects the cells. So drugs like rapamycin that inhibit the mTOR pathway are very promising in terms of longevity.
Is there a way to measure autophagy or how deep you are into autophagy?
I mean, there are a lot of molecular ways to do it. I'm not aware of any sort of tests commercially that are available. But if if I take your cells, I can measure it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm always wondering because, like many people, I'm always wanting to cycle in and out of that, but then I don't know how to actually measure how
yeah,
deep I am into it. And it seems a bit, there's different lines of thought, like, how long it takes exactly. How
yeah,
long do you feel it takes in a human? I'm assuming it's bio-individual, right? Because some
yeah.
people could have more stored.
All of these things are personal. I think
Yeah.
we'll probably come to this later, but I think when it comes to taking supplements, it's really about finding the right combinations that work for you, and
Hmm.
there isn't a one size fits all. I think
Yeah.
for activating autophagy, one of the best markers is whether you're in ketogenesis or not, and you can measure that.
Hmm.
The That's different for different people. For some people, it's 16 hours or more of fasting. Other people can do 12-12, and they can activate ketogenesis. Also, there's some concerns that if you do too much fasting. So again, that's a place where you need to find the right model for you. And I realize it's easy to say that and hard to do that for the average person. So that's
Yeah.
sort of the challenge of the field right now. I think we know a lot about aging, and we know a lot of things we can do to slow the aging process, but applying that at the individual level right now is still as much research as it is clinical practice. So
Yeah. Um, Going back to the maybe measuring your ketones, because
yeah,
that's something I can easily do
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Is there like a threshold? Like, is it X amount? Do we want to be at like 4, in the ketone measurement to be in autophagy, or if you just have any ketones measurable?
I think any ketones is a good sign because it's
Okay.
not easy to get into ketogenesis for most people.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I
so,
go kind of right in, but yeah.
yeah, I'm guessing you know how to do it.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I think anything is a good sign there. And, also I think how you get to ketogenesis is really important. Like
Hmm.
I'm not supportive of these heavy ketogenic diets, particularly because I think they're hard to maintain, and they will cause weight loss and they will
Hmm.
cause ketogenesis, but they're hard to maintain. And then when people go off of them, they often recover their weight or even more.
Yeah.
So I think fasting is a really good way to get to ketogenesis, because if you do 16-hour fasts and that's healthy for you, you can achieve that and still eat a relatively normal balanced diet. I kind of a boring guy. I recommend balancing macronutrients.
I mean, I totally agree. Are you in the line of thought of like the Mediterranean diet? Is that
Yeah,
kind of what you're thinking?
I think that's healthy. One of the things I did that really helped me is that I started monitoring my calorie intake,
Mhm.
because I thought I knew how many calories were in different foods, and I sort of did, but there were some big surprises too. So now I'm more careful about that. I try to get to the right number of calories per day. I don't do fasting on a regular basis because I'm traveling all the time. It makes it hard to do. But
Yeah.
I do try to get about a normal calorie intake and get enough protein in my diet, and watching what I eat helps a lot there.
Yeah. Well, how do you define fasting? Like, how many hours would you say constitutes a fast?
Well, personally, when I try to do it, I try to eat one meal a day, like in the
Okay.
evening. So
Hmm.
I will not strictly on a water diet, but pretty close during the day, and then during the evening, I have one meal of whatever I want. So that works for me. I think a lot of these things are about sustainability, right?
Yeah.
You have to figure out what works for you. Now, you might argue that while eating your big meal in the evening is a bad idea,
I was
and
gonna ask. I was like how close to
yeah,
bed?
and there's some truth to that probably, but it works for my lifestyle. And
Yeah.
I think for the majority of the population, trying to find sustainable changes you can make, even if they're not huge changes,
Hmm.
sustainable changes that you can make that fit your lifestyle,
Yeah.
is a good place to start.
Yeah, I agree. Well, going back since you mentioned it to
Yeah,
it's like the great protein debate right now,
yeah,
right? We have some individuals recommending, 1 pound or more per pound of body weight. Then we obviously also know, as you mentioned, the mTOR activation versus
yeah,
autophagy. Where do you land on that? How much protein do you think, is
yeah.
optimal?
I think a lot depends on how much you exercise and
Okay.
how much resistance training you're doing, whether you're using the protein or not. Because we know first of all that in animal models, if you look at isocaloric diets for animals, almost any animal, they
Mm.
even did this in wasps. I don't
Oh,
know who did the
okay.
study in wasps, but also in mice and other. The what you find is that high carb, low protein is associated with longevity, not high protein, low carb. Now, there's some caveats to that. The first is that it's complex carbs, but you're giving the animals not simple sugars necessarily.
So it'd be like sweet potatoes, like kind of vegetable-based
Yeah,
carbs? Is that what they're giving?
it's a formulated diet, but yeah, it's more complex carbs. The second thing is that really, I think that these animals are sedentary. I mean, if you take a mouse, and it's living in a cage in the lab. Out in the wild, it's running kilometers a day. In the cage, it's not moving as much. So what we're really defining is the optimal diet for sedentary animals. But a lot of humans are sedentary. And so if you're eating a lot of protein and you have a lot of circulating amino acids, and you're not using those, then that's a risk factor for cardiovascular disease and other things, and kidney disease. So I think that balancing your protein intake to your usage is really important. And for healthy individuals, one way to look at that is to measure your nitrogen in your urine. If that nitrogen is really high, now it can be high because of pathology and other problems, but for a healthy person, if it's high, I think one thing it's telling you is you're probably eating too much amino acids for what you're using. And so I think, and that comes back to one of the things I tell people is that taking things, doing things, interventions are great. Trying HBOT, all these things are great. Measure. You need to be measuring how your body's changing. And the more you're measuring how you're changing, the better you'll understand what works for you. And things like blood urea nitrogen is a good example of that. It's a simple thing to measure and gives you an idea about your diet.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it also kind of validates what I'm doing personally is days that I'm having intense exercise training, I'm increasing my protein,
I
and
think
then
that makes sense.
I'm down regulating it on days that I'm not.
Yeah.
So, well, I want to kind of like take a step back and just talk about aging as, a whole. There's really no one better to chat about this with, but I mean, from what I understand, we went from having the 9 hallmarks of aging. You, I believe, called them the pillars of aging, right? And then we went to 12, and now we're at like 14.
Pretty soon it's going to be 20,000.
I mean, so what are your current thoughts on hallmarks of aging? Like, what are the common threads throughout them? What do you think we've got right? What might we need to work more on?
Well, even though I had a big role in writing that Pillars paper, I've always been a little bit of a skeptic about this because, I think we're identifying these pillars and hallmarks, and certainly those are pathways that are related to aging, and they are modified when animals live longer. And so I agree with all of that, but I think what it misses is the systemic nature of aging. Really, I think your body is interacting, communicating, different cells and tissues are communicating with each other and trying to keep you healthy. So you have this like homeostasis in your body. You respond to things that are happening and you maintain your health and function. But over time, there's damage that's happening. There's stochastic events that are happening. Maybe you're not living a great lifestyle, and that system starts to break down. And when that system breaks down, then you're susceptible to disease. And depending on your individual organ aging and your genetics and your lifestyle, you might get one type of disease or another. But I think really for healthy longevity, we're looking at maintaining that homeostasis. And so, the interventions that extend lifespan, like inhibiting mTOR, they don't hit one hallmark or one pillar of aging. They affect all of them because they're maintaining the homeostasis in the body. And I think that systemic component is what we should be thinking about. The challenge with that is that it's easy to say what I just said, but it's hard to explain what that means. And it's easier to target different pathways and say, this is what we need to do. But I'm not sure that fixing one pathway at a time is going to get us to immortality. I think that we need to think more about the body as a whole.
Do you think that immortality is possible?
I don't know. Well, I mean, let's say is not aging possible because eventually we're going to get hit by a bus or something. But,
that's true.
But I think it's unclear at this point. It's certainly no data that I know of that supports that. I think, let me take a step back. Here's another question. Is it possible to extend maximum lifespan? I'm very confident that the interventions that we're trying right now, some of them are going to extend median life expectancy. They're going to extend health span. And probably they're going to square the curve. They're going to get people closer to their maximum lifespan. Whether any of those interventions extend maximum lifespan or not is an open question. Now, some of them do in animal models, but if you look at the human data analysis, people like Peter Fedichev at Gero are doing, they might suggest that they're not going to affect maximum lifespan in humans. And that means we might have to think completely differently about how to get to 150 or longer. And I think that's an open question in the field right now. It's a really exciting research area. Ultimately, I think it's possible, but I'm not sure that the path we're on right now is going to get us there.
Interesting. And would you redefine the path that we're on right now as targeting the individual hallmarks of aging?
That, and also just, most of 90% of my research until recently was in animal models. I've stopped torturing animals and now I'm torturing humans. We don't torture either.
Yes,
Don't worry, it's a joke.
Yes.
But all of that reliance on animal models identifies pathways that extend lifespan in animals. And certainly some of those pathways are conserved with humans. However, there may be key features of aging that are different in short-lived animals than in long-lived animals. And we started a field called gerophysics in the last couple of years, which sort of brings the theoretical physicist into the gerontology research, because ultimately, I think if we're going to understand aging, we need to be able to write mathematical equations that define it. And that brings in, concepts like entropy, which is a complicated concept, but, it allows you to think about aging in a different way. And it suggests that maybe if you really want to dramatically impact aging, you have to look at different kinds of interventions. So.
Yeah. Can you define entropy for anyone that's listening?
Yeah, entropy is like a second law of thermodynamics. It's an increase in disorder of any system over time. And there are like 20 different kinds of entropy that are applied to different areas. But when you think about, as you're aging, you are getting more disordered. If you look at DNA methylation, for instance, you can see that, it's highly regulated in young cells, but then it slowly breaks down over time. And so that's happening in all your different systems, and how to change that process at a conceptual level is a different way of thinking.
Yeah, because I suppose a question would be, is it just the let's say damage over time, or is it more of a programmed, decline?
Yeah, I think the question of programmed aging is interesting. I don't tend to think of aging as being programmed. I think of health as being programmed. And so to me, that's a breakdown over time. Now, there are models that suggest that aging is programmed and is part of our, our evolutionary selection. But I haven't seen compelling data for that. So,
out of all the hallmarks of aging, the 12 that we have now, are there, 1 to 3 that you think are probably where we need to be focusing most of our energy?
Yeah, I'm really focused on inflammaging and the increases in sterile chronic inflammation that are happening in individuals over time. I think that you can define increased inflammation in almost any process of aging. So it's not really the field I worked on my whole career, but I think it's just emerging. Every time we develop biomarkers of aging or we identify new drugs that target aging, they're anti-inflammatory. And I think that that's something we need to focus on more. Now, it may be that chronic inflammation is something that's happening relatively late in the aging process. It may not be the early defining factors that are driving aging, but I think it's compelling that inflammation is touching on so many different components. I like to think a lot about adult stem cells in the body. I mean, all of your tissues have stem cells that can replenish at different levels your tissues, and they decline when function with aging. I think that's heavily linked to the mTOR pathway, and one of the things that reducing mTOR signaling is doing is allowing adult stem cells to function later in life. So, and again, that's very connected to proteostasis, and, rapamycin is anti-inflammatory. And so it gets really hard to like pull out one thing or another, but those are two that I think about a lot.
But isn't it so we feel like suppressing the mTOR could be really helpful, but we also want to have muscle mass, right?
Yeah.
Which it's like such a balance here. And how do
Yeah.
we achieve that?
Well, I think it's nuanced, right? I think what's happening with mTOR is more complex. It's not just about turning it up or turning it down. This is a pathway that needs to be activated. For instance, when you do heavy exercise, you activate mTOR in your skeletal muscle. When you have an infection, you activate mTOR in your immune system. When you cut your skin, you activate mTOR in your skin. And it's there for a purpose. The problem, and when you're young, though, you can turn it off when you don't need it. I think that's the key thing. And as you get older, the data suggests that you can't turn this pathway back off. And so mTOR's on all the time. And so I think what's happening with something like rapamycin, if it's dosed right, is it restores that dynamic range you have when you're young. You can still turn it on when you need to, but you can turn it off when you don't need it. And that's what's good for aging. Now, I noticed, I've taken I'm not taking it now, but I've taken rapamycin intermittently in the past. One of the things I do notice is that I feel like my exercise is not as good in the 24 hours or so after I take it, because I take it once a week. But then I feel like over a couple days, my exercise performance is very good. So there may be some immediate effects of taking it that's a personal observation, but there may be some immediate effects of taking it in the window after 12 to 24 hours that means you can't really activate TOR to the level you should. So.
Yeah. I don't know if you have followed this at all, but I think that Brian Johnson said rapamycin aged him, and so he stopped taking it. Did you see that at all?
I saw that, yes.
I don't know what his reasoning for that was, but
using biomarkers, I believe.
Okay.
But I think that it's a little bit misleading. So, and let me take a step back with Brian, because I think that he's first of all, I support what he's doing conceptually. I have problems in the details. So conceptually, he's trying to, modify himself, modify his lifestyle, what he takes, what he eats, how he behaves, so that he'll live a very long time. And he's testing that on himself. And I think that's really interesting. I support hackers trying to do that. I think it's their body, first of all. And I really think it's important that people take charge of their health and become their own best ambassador for their health. I think my concern with him is he's doing too many things at once. And if you're taking 20 or 30 different kinds of pills a day, then it's really hard to know what's happening. And for instance, you can go through his list of supplements, and at least I don't know what he's taking right now, but when I did this last year, at least 7 or 8 of them inhibit the mTOR pathway on their own. And then if you're adding rapamycin on top of that, you may be turning it down too much. You're not restoring the dynamic range. You're turning down activation at that point. And that's probably bad for aging. So, I encourage people to do 1 or 2 things, monitor what's happening to them. And then if they don't like the changes in their biomarkers, and we can talk about what those biomarkers are, but if they don't like the changes in their biomarkers, maybe do some course correction, go off of one, try another one. If things are working, go off of one of them for a while, see if the effect goes away. I think that you really have to do that kind of experimentation to optimize your own health, and just taking a whole stack of different things is just rolling the dice. If I do studies in mice, and I start combining 2 or 3 things together, I can't predict what's going to happen. Sometimes they cancel each other out. And so these supplements and drugs interact with each other, not just with your body. And so if you're taking, a pill that's supposed to have 10 things in it, unless they've tested those 10 things directly together, then I can't predict what's going to happen. So that's what I'm concerned about with him. I think that overall, what he's trying to do is great, but some of the messages I think are misleading. So,
yeah, that's super important, and that's also more of the direction that I'm trying to go is trying to do less. I mean, I also I have been doing this for so long, like over 10 years, and then I had I opened this like longevity medicine clinic in like 2019ish, and so it's like a candy store, right? Like you have literally access to everything. I was like doing every IV on the planet and all the things at the same time, and I'm like, I have no idea. You and I chatted briefly about the ovarian age test that I did, and the result that I got initially is great. That's exciting, but I couldn't tell you what was it. I mean, obviously the lifestyle things, I'm sure, have been a big contributor if, we believe
Yeah,
this
sure.
score is really accurate. But I have done so many other things too. I mean, I was
Yeah.
doing curcumin IVs at one
Yeah.
point and all this
Yeah.
other stuff. So
Yeah.
it's like what helped, what
Yeah, I'm
didn't.
kind of like that too. I'm my own experimental organism at this point. So,
Yeah. I
uh,
mean, I love
but
that.
but
I
what I
learned,
do is like what you're doing now. I'm trying to do one or two things at a time, and
yeah.
then and see how that's affecting my body. So
Yeah, I mean, we were chatting about it, but I'm at this point, we know what the science says: sleep,
yeah,
exercise,
yeah,
social connections,
yeah,
don't smoke, don't do
yeah,
drugs. But on top of outside of that, it's a little bit the Wild West. We
yeah,
really don't know.
yeah,
So if people are doing it in a controlled way, I think it's not a bad thing, personally.
yeah. I tell people that the worst thing is to be doing nothing about aging.
Right.
If you want to be conservative and say, I'm just going to focus on lifestyle,
Mhm.
maybe a couple supplements, and I'm going to wait on some of these other experimental procedures until there's more data, I think that's a defensible argument.
Yeah.
If you want to say, I want to be on the cutting edge, I'm balancing my risk reward
Mhm.
differently, maybe, and I see the potential rewards of these things as higher than the risk,
Mhm.
and I want to be out in front trying it. I think that's great too. I think you have to find your your place on this spectrum, right? And
Yeah.
from conservative to, I don't want to say risky, but to more on the edge. And the thing that worries me is when people are doing nothing, and they're not paying attention to their health. And I think things are starting to change. Even in the U.S., things are starting to change. Every 2 months, I go through the airports, and
Mhm.
so that's my monitor for how
Okay.
health is
Yeah.
going. And I think it's beginning to change, but there's still so many people that just ignore, their health until it's too late and they have some chronic condition that is very hard to do something about. And that's what I worry about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the stats would suggest that that's the majority of people. They're
Yeah,
not
for
doing
sure.
too much. I mean, we do have GLP-1s now,
Yeah.
which I was trying to recall what the statistics are for how many people have taken them, but it's a very large percentage now that
Yeah.
have taken some sort of GLP-1. I suppose now maybe we can even chat about if you are interested in those, like
Yeah, happy to talk about those.
GLP-1s now. Retrutide or Red
Yeah.
Retta is like,
Yeah.
everybody on the internet is talking about
Yeah.
this. Um, yeah, I don't know. I tried a microdose for a very short
Yeah.
period of time, and my weight is already pretty much where I want it to
Yeah.
be, and it actually suppressed my appetite. I was doing five units a week,
Yeah.
and it was increasing my resting heart rate a bit. So I just got off of it.
Yeah.
But do you think that the longevity benefits are separate from the weight loss?
Yeah.
Because it seems as if that's what it's indicating.
Yeah, it could be. I think we don't know for sure yet. And there's just not enough studies done in people that are already at their optimal weight and have good metabolic health. And that's where the data we're lacking right now. And
Mhm.
I think the longevity field, though, has to really pay attention to these drugs. And also, I'm currently taking low-dose SGLT2 inhibitor,
Okay.
also used as a metabolic health drug. And
Mhm.
I don't have any metabolic problems, and you could argue I'm a couple kilograms overweight, but I'm pretty close to healthy and pretty fit. But I'm taking it just to see what it does to my aging biomarkers, because this is a drug that inhibits glucose reabsorption in the kidney, so you just pee out a little bit more glucose,
Mhm.
and a little salt too, which is good. And for me, that's probably a healthy thing. Now, there is a slight increased risk of UTIs because you have more glucose in your urine. But
Mhm.
other than that, the side effect profiles are very low. Doesn't affect appetite. And so that's the path I've chosen to go on. But I think this class of drugs generally is very promising. They're better than metformin, in my
Mhm.
opinion. And they're worth looking at in the context of longevity. I think the muscle loss is the challenge.
Yeah.
And so if you're taking one, you need to be doing something to maintain resistance training. Certainly for people that are overweight or have
Mhm.
metabolic problems, they should probably be doing something, because that's definitely accelerating their aging. For healthy people, I think it's still an open question, but it's certainly a promising, both of those classes of drugs are promising, I think.
And what biomarkers, and we haven't talked about biological aging yet, which maybe that
Yeah.
fits in here, but
Yeah.
what biomarkers are you looking at to see if this is
Yeah.
efficacious?
I look at a wide range of things. I
Mhm.
think that we have developed this clock called Lineage 2 at the National University of Singapore, and this is Jan Gruber and Feng Sheng, and a little bit of help from me. So it's a big collaboration there at the university. And the reason this was developed is we wanted something that was actionable. And so a lot of people are using DNA methylation clocks and other kinds of clocks to measure your biologic age. And we can take a deep dive into that if you want. Basically, I don't believe that there's anything special about DNA methylation. You can measure biologic age from protein composition, from RNA composition, you can measure it from metabolite composition, you can measure it from microbiome composition in your gut, or even your facial structural changes with age. So, any complex data set, if you have enough people, you can develop something that predicts their chronologic age. The challenge with that, though, is that these things are not actionable. If I say there's 10 methylation sites that are making you 10 years too old, the doctor says, well, what am I going to do about that?
Exactly.
And so I thought they were not, these clocks are not getting enough traction in a medical situation in hospitals with doctors. And even longevity clinics sometimes are scared of using them because they want to see their clients doing better over time. And if they don't know how to make that happen, they're afraid to use measurements like this. So we decided, can we take standard clinical chemistries, things you measure all the time, things you should be getting when you get a health checkup, LDL, HbA1c, these are the standard stuff. And can we develop a second generation biologic aging clock that predicts mortality? So it gives you your risk adjusted age. So if I say you're 40, it means you have the mortality risk of a 40-year-old. And can we do that from these parameters? Because if we can, they're all actionable. If LDL is what's driving your mortality risk, we can bring that down. And so if blood pressure is what's driving your mortality risk, we can bring that down. And so Jan and Feng Sheng have done a lot of work now to optimize these clocks, and I think they're working. We can take people, baseline them with these measurements, and then we use a linear strategy so we get principal components out of it. We can figure out which components are increasing their biologic age and then target those components. And then over 3 to 6 months, even with just on-label medication, over 3 to 6 months, we can often bring down their mortality risk, or with lifestyle. Now, the next step is to see, what do these geroprotectors do? Are they even more effective than statins or something? And are they generally effective? Do they bring down biologic age in a wide range of the population? But for now, this works because a hospital looks at this and say, we're measuring aging, but we know how to modify it, and we can do it using on-label medications, which a lot of doctors can get behind right now. And with geroprotectors and longevity clinics, there's still a lot of skepticism out there. I'm very supportive of them, but in the standard medical community, they're not yet getting widespread acceptance. So,
yeah, I started doing biological age testing, like the epigenetic testing, many years ago, but I actually pulled it from what I'm doing on a consistent basis, because a mutual friend of ours, Matt, and his whole situation of sending out the multiple tests and at the same time and getting wildly different results. And also I feel like a responsibility as having, an audience of some level to tell them to do something that is actionable. What are they going to do with, and the test, let's say it's I forgot, between what, $500 or something. If you're going to spend $500, you might as well do something that's going to be more actionable, as you're saying. So.
Well, this is kind of a two-way benefit. You should be measuring all these markers anyway. In fact, a lot of them are reimbursed in your standard checkup. But on top of that, we're measuring aging for you. We do the methylation test in the laboratory. I think from a research perspective, they're interesting. Also from, we collect 100, 500 samples and run them all at the same time under the same conditions. They've all been in the same freezer beforehand. They're not being shipped across the country. And so if you do that, you can really get reproducible results with something like methylation testing. The problem is if you're looking at it from a consumer perspective, nobody yet has convinced me they can get that level of reproducibility if you're taking blood or saliva and sending it across the country. And I like what these companies are trying to do, but I'm not sure I've seen compelling data yet on that. And again, there's an actionability issue with them.
So is it just, because like Matt setting off the exact same test, same sample,
Yeah.
same day, same time, etc. Is it just like degradation of the sample on the way to the lab?
It's unclear what happened there, and I use that data in my talks too. But
You do?
I think the caveat to that is that's an n=1.
Yeah.
Because anything could have happened in that one sample. It would be interesting to have 50 people do that,
Yeah.
and see how consistent the data really is. Now, the other thing about methylation is it varies, morning, evening, you can get slightly different readings at different times. And so there is error in these measurements, and that's, up to 4 years average. So if you measure 3 months apart, that noise is something you have to take into account. So you really need to look at trends over time with these tests. And, I also really like the second generation tests. The first generation tests predict your chronologic age, and then the deviation from that, your chronologic age, is considered your biologic age. But what we really know is that deviation is noise in the measurement, noise in the experimental approach, and probably biologic age. So it's not strictly biologic age you're looking at there. So I think the first generation clocks are interesting, but they're not the best ones to use if you're really interested in your own health. The second generation clocks that measure an outcome like mortality, those are more interesting because they're predicting the future, which is really what you want. You want to know how healthy you're going to be in 5 or 10 or 20 years from now, not, what your current deviation is. That's less important, I think. So.
Yeah. Do you think that I've heard that maybe the pace of aging, would you identify that as a second generation clock? Is that one more accurate? And let's say if you have, a 0.5 pace of aging, do you really feel as if you're only aging at like half the speed?
Yeah, I think those clocks are less developed. The clocks we've been talking about sort of measure the odometer in your car, how many miles are on the car. Whereas this clock's trying to measure the speedometer in your car. I think it's fascinating. I use that test, the Dunedin test, and I'd like to see more tests continue to be developed along those lines. The challenge is I think we can make much better clocks if we have better data. And what's really still lacking is really good longitudinal data. So looking at the same people over time to see how they're changing. But yeah, I think the pace of aging clocks are interesting. I think the organ aging clocks are also interesting. And there's like a fundamental question in the field right now that not everybody agrees on. And some people will tell you that you're just a set of different organs aging at different rates, and we need to identify the organs that are aging the fastest, and that's where we need to do interventions. And other people, and I guess I'm in this category, would say that no, there is a systemic aging process in the body, and we need to measure that. And then when that process starts to break down, then knowing the organ age is really important because it's telling you which diseases you're going to get at that point. So to me, it's a combination of looking at the systemic level and then at the specific level. So the organ aging clocks are also interesting. They're also less developed. They're getting better. But I think, if you're really interested, you need to be looking at different levels.
Is the lineage available for anyone to use at this point, or just something that you guys are working with in your lab?
It's being developed for widespread use in Singapore through the National University system, and we're commercializing it right now. And so we're typically looking at doing it through a B2B approach because there's a lot of information in there. And we want to work with doctors and longevity clinics and hospitals to disseminate that information. We haven't started going direct to consumer yet. I think that's interesting, but we need to comply with regulatory issues around disseminating medical knowledge. So right now, this is not a medical test, and we give the information to doctors.
Do you guys anticipate using machine learning to further? Because the test that I did for the ovarian aging, it's like an ML model.
That's what this is. It's an AI driven model.
Okay.
So we took the NHANES data set, which is a large retrospective data set. So there's follow-up data for 20 years on mortality. We need that. We're trying to predict mortality. We're not predicting age. So you need a data set over time so you have follow-up on people. And So that then applied AI approaches to that, and we're looking at nonlinear AI approaches too, but which may be more accurate, but you give up explainability a little bit with that. So if you can't explain why it's happening, then you can't intervene, and it's not actionable again. So the type of AI you use influences whether the accuracy, but also the actionability as well. So we're looking at those different approaches. Jan and Fengsheng are looking at UK Biobank now too to try to get more data to improve it and different strategies. So.
Yeah, I love that. What do you agree with the idea that, the aging is like non-linear? So, and it probably looks different for women and men, obviously, since women have menopause, and I'm so excited to get into all things like ovarian aging. But what are the main spurts that it seems like we're aging at?
Yeah. So let me take those two questions separately.
Yes.
I think that the data is beginning to show that there are transitions, that it's not a linear process. And one of the reasons I tend to believe that is two very different kinds of approaches. Michael Snyder did one study on this, and Peter Fedichev and Jarrow did another study, and they both showed that there's transitions around that 40 to 50. There's a big transition, then another one around 65. And so when you have two different kinds of data analysis that sort of converge on the same results, then I think it's something that's certainly worth following up, and it may be real. I think it's probably true that it's not just a linear progression. Definitely men and women age differently. And you can see this just in the animal models. If you look at interventions that extend lifespan, I'd say the majority of them differentially work in males and females. Some work better in females, some work better in males. There are a few that work in both. But clearly, there's something going on related to sex, and probably it's sex hormones. And then if you layer menopause on top of that, because the animal models we study there are only a very few species that actually have menopause. For most animals, there's just a steady decline in estrogen over time. And so when you layer menopause on top of that, I think it's even more important, the differences between males and females. And I still think even now we underappreciate the acceleration of aging that happens with menopause in women, and probably also with andropause in men. There's a big debate about testosterone supplementation that we can get into as well. But I think that probably contributes to aging more in men than we realize.
The decrease in testosterone.
Yeah.
Probably.
Because it may not be affecting lifespan as much as it is health span.
Yeah.
And I think that may be true for both. The women live longer, but they have a longer period of decline too. And that's probably largely menopause related. And I think that probably if you look at testosterone levels, you would find something similar in men. The men that have low testosterone are probably having longer period of I guess six span.
Yeah, it's like suboptimal function as well.
Yeah.
So are you a fan of like bioidentical hormone replacement therapy for both or either sex?
I think, again, for men, it's about measuring. It's like we don't want to go to too high levels. And
some
because
men definitely want to be there.
Some men want to be there, but there is risk associated with this. There's prostate cancer risks and other things. So let me take a step back, because I think part of this comes into allowing the person to decide what they want to do. Because you might make different decisions with testosterone supplementation. You might say, I'm really worried. I want to minimize my risk of dying from some disease. And so in that case, I'm not going to supplement. You might say that I value, my ability to function. I like playing tennis. I want to do that when I'm in my 80s. I like being vigorous. And I think that I'm willing to take a little bit of extra risk for better health during that period of time. And both of those are valid opinions. And I think we need to allow people to, ideally we educate people and let them make those choices. But if you're going to supplement with testosterone, I think it's really important to know where you are first and not go too high. And certainly probably bioidentical is a good way to go. I think I can talk about Matt. He's been public about this, but his testosterone was low, and he took I don't know what strategy he took, but he increased his testosterone, and he gained like 15 pounds of muscle. And I saw him, I'm like, I need to do this too. And so then I tested mine, but it's actually not low, so it's pretty normal. So I'm like, it's a chance to gain muscle mass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty amazing. I mean, I haven't followed really the data on men too much, but with women, it seems also to be like a good longevity strategy for replacing those hormones, from cancer and bone density and all these different areas potentially. Well, maybe not so much cancer, but like cardiovascular intervention.
I'm surprised that for bone health, for all kinds of health in women, I'm surprised at how HRT hasn't taken off more than it has. I mean, I know there were some studies that were unintentionally misinterpreted, that suggested there was high risk of hormone replacement therapy. And I know that triggered doctors not to prescribe it. I understand the history of this, but I mean, come on. The question shouldn't be, should I do HRT for a woman? It should be, is there any reason I shouldn't do HRT? And there are reasons, the cancer risk and other things. There are people that probably shouldn't be doing it. But for the majority of women, I think it's, especially if they started, during that perimenopausal period or right after menopause, I think it's beneficial. And, I go to countries, I always ask the doctors, how much hormone replacement therapy, and you go to countries and it's still under 20% in a lot of countries. And I feel like we're really, hurting women's health by not taking this seriously and pushing those numbers up.
Yeah. I mean, I heard the statistic is like ultra low. It's like 5% of women are on a hormone replacement. Yeah. But, that really, the Women's Health Initiative really did do so much damage because even, my mom is 53 and she went into menopause at 47, so early. But we live very different lifestyles. But, I told her, I said, Mom, you got to get on like hormone replacement therapy. And she went to her doctor and she doesn't have any risk factors that would preclude her from being on it. And he said, oh no, it causes cancer. You can't be on it. And I'm like, what? And we're still pushing that narrative in 2026.
I agree. And I think on a broader perspective, this is a real problem. And we have this idea of the Hippocratic Oath, right? And nobody's read it, but everybody says they follow it. Yeah, I actually read it, because it's they have it plastered all over the walls at the medical school in US, and so I stopped and read it one day, and it has some interesting things in it. First of all, it says that if you have a knowledge of medicine, you should convey that knowledge of medicine to the next generation at no cost. Basically. Okay. I don't think Harvard Medical School read that part. I don't want to single out Harvard, or all of them do that. But I think nowhere does it say really first do no harm. I mean, it's kind of a little bit implied, but that's the thing that comes out of everybody's mind. And then the next step people take is that, well, if people aren't sick, we're not going to do anything for them because we could harm them. And I think doing nothing for people is harming them. We should be trying to really focus on people's health throughout their life course, not only after they get some ICD code, and the fact that we ignore people until they get sick is a really bad way to do healthcare, because once they get really sick, it's really hard to fix them. Whereas I think there are a lot of small adjustments you can make during the life course that will keep them from getting sick until later. And so, if you're not getting any medical advice or any help not being supported in your health now, you need to go find some way to do that, because not only is it about preventing disease, it's about optimizing performance. Yeah. If you're taking a good lifestyle approach, maybe some of these supplements, maybe some of the devices, it's going to improve how you think, how you exercise. Like I have a couple supplements that for me improve how I exercise. I take it not because 20 years from now I'm going to be healthy. Well, a little bit because of that, but a lot because of the fact that I feel better and function better now. And one of the things is that we don't tend to talk about is, I think, improving performance and enhancing longevity are highly overlapping strategies. Maybe 80% of the things you do for longevity also will enhance your performance now. And so we should focus on both of those together, not just, what you do this stuff in 30 years from now, you're not going to be sick. That doesn't motivate most people.
Yeah.
But do this, and in 3 months, you're thinking more clearly, sleeping better, maybe your stress is down, your exercise is more effective. That motivates people if they feel that, and so I want to focus more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we have most in our control at this point anyways. What can we do right now? What are some of the things? What are some of the supplement or exogenous molecules that you're interested in right now?
Well, right now I'm doing 3 things. I mentioned the SGLT2 inhibitors. I'm taking that off label. The other 2 are supplements, and I have to, full disclosure, one of them I helped develop. So it's a product called Rejuvent by PDL Health, and it contains a sustained release alpha-ketoglutarate. And for me, that's lowered biologic age, and I've been taking that for a long time. It also contains different products for men and women, so they both contain B-complex vitamins, because we noticed that AKG doesn't work well if your B-complex levels are low. And then for men, it contains low-dose vitamin A, and for women, low-dose vitamin D, because we saw synergies in preclinical studies with those compounds. So they're all natural products in it. So I take that, and then...
May I ask, what's the mechanism for AKG?
Yeah, no, you can't ask that. This is a real challenge, because this is a central metabolite in the body. Your body makes a lot of it and uses it. You can't get it in food or diet because it's consumed as fast as it's made in animals. So, but the problem is you make less of it with aging, and it participates in hundreds of different reactions in the cell. And so when it goes down with age, you could, at a simplistic level, you could say that the cell loses its sort of metabolic flexibility.
Okay.
It's not so easy to convert amino acids to energy or glucose to amino acids. And supplementing that back up, we think that helps. Now, we can find specific improvements in, say, microbiome. It improves red blood cell performance, and getting to specific mechanism is a real challenge. And actually, the other supplement I was going to talk about is also true, NAD.
Yeah.
People assume NAD does certain things, and it may do those things, but it does many things. And what it really does for aging is still an open question. But again, this is a central metabolite that goes down with age, and it stimulates hundreds of different enzymatic reactions in the cell.
Yeah.
So, and that's the other product I take. I've struggled with NMN and NR. Matt and I are kind of in the same boat there. I think it's taking it orally, unless you take a lot of it, doesn't increase NAD levels that much. And so there's a company called IX Biopharma that produces a sublingual version of NAD that goes directly into the bloodstream. And that, when I take that with the AKG, it changes my endurance performance.
Oh, nice. I love that. With NAD, I mean, I was reading a review of, the ability. So at one point in my life, I was doing the NAD IVs. I just had access to them. Now I have a whole different subset of concerns around microplastic exposure with these IV therapies, which actually curious. I mean, that seems to be a real problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
These elective IV therapies and the microplastic exposure.
I think that's a concern. I don't know that we know how much of a problem it is. It's certainly a concern at this point.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm concerned about is if you're not doing IV therapies fairly frequently, I'm not sure how much is helping. One large bolus of NAD, you come back a month later. I mean, I don't know how often you were doing it, but if you
I was doing it a lot, but most people are not.
If you come back a month or two later and do it again, you have most of that time in between you're not changing your NAD levels. These things get consumed. So that's why I went to the sublingual approach, because every day I can take a gram of it, and it's
And is it NR, NMN, or
it's
NAD
directly
itself? Okay. And that makes it into the cell, okay?
That's an interesting question. It makes it into the bloodstream. They have good evidence on that. And how NAD, NMN, or NR gets into different cells is still a research question. And there's a huge debate right now between whether NR is better or NMN is better for doing that, and how those molecules get into cells, how much they change NAD levels in different tissues. I haven't generally taken sides on that because we haven't done a lot of research on it. Then, the NAD IV or the NAD sublingually is putting NAD in the bloodstream. And there's a lot of skepticism about how that gets into cells. There are papers suggesting there are receptors that can take NAD up directly, but they're very preliminary data so far. And maybe it has to get converted back to something else to get in. These are still open questions. What I know is when I take this, what happens to me is that, and I have to take the AKG too. If I go off either one of them, it slowly goes away. So if I take this, my heart rate goes up normally when I'm a runner. When heart rate goes up normally. My respiration rate doesn't go up at the same pace. So I'm breathing more slowly and exercising at a higher level. So for me, it's improving exercise performance.
Great.
Maybe that's a vascular benefit. I'm getting better oxygen delivery to tissues. I don't really know what's happening. And I also, again, this is very personalized.
Yeah.
Whether those two things would give the same effect in you or someone else we don't know. But I think that's one of the points I want to make is that you have to find the things that are working for you. Don't just take things and don't test and don't measure, don't observe how your body's changing. I've taken a lot of other things I didn't notice an effect of, so I quit taking them. So I think that I found things that seem to work well for me, and that's really the challenge for people.
What about some of these? So I'm so fascinated because now I've kind of I've flipped my entire longevity strategy to be about ovarian aging at this point, because I feel as if I can push that out. Obviously, we know that we can push out a whole bunch of other things that come along with it. So mitochondrial function is huge on my list because, as we know, in the oocytes, there's the highest density of mitochondria in the entire body. It's really wild. Do you think that there's any... I have some mitochondrial function tests here. I actually haven't done my first one. I will be doing it soon. But do you think that those are valid? Have you seen those at all? And then what about some of the mitochondrial, I suppose, supplements, maybe like urolithin A or something of that nature?
I know about the testing, but I haven't looked into them deeply enough to really say. I think it's an interesting avenue. Certainly if they're accurate, I think they're probably interesting tests for people to be doing. Mitochondrial function is important for ovarian aging, but it's probably very important for general aging as well. So, I'll come to urolithin in a second. One of the things that I wanted to mention, though, is that we have a paper that's being reviewed right now, and we took a lot of geroprotectors. So these are drugs and supplements that have been reported to extend lifespan somewhere in the animal models, usually worms, flies, or mice, and or there may be human data. And then we tested those for ovarian aging. So first we started in worms and hermaphrodites and showed that whether it increases their period of fertility or not. And then we have retested that in stem cell models and mouse. And the take-home message is a large percentage of these geroprotectors also delay ovarian aging. So you could interpret that to mean, well, the things that are affecting aging in the whole body are relevant in the ovary as well. Or you could interpret that some of these interventions are actually working because they're slowing reproductive aging, and that's having a knock-on effect on the rest of the body. We don't have the answers to that yet, but it means that most of these molecules that are geroprotectors are good candidates to delay ovarian decline, potentially extend fertility, delay menopause. So there's and if you look at the literature, there's already data on AKG. There's already data on NAD precursors. There's already, not our data, there's already data on metformin and rapamycin. And there's a clinical trial going on with rapamycin with Yushin So at Columbia, good friend of mine. And so that's really interesting. We found a lot more molecules, one of which is urolithin, which is very robust effect on frailty in our studies, but also on female fertility. I think urolithin is a really interesting molecule. It enhances mitophagy, and then turning over damaged mitochondria leads to production of new mitochondria, so it enhances mitochondrial biogenesis as well. I think it has other activities as well, but I think it's an intriguing molecule. I haven't tried taking it myself yet, but it's certainly on my list. So
Yeah. So can we walk through all the things that you have kind of tried on the animal models with the ovarian, so aging, so
Yeah.
NR or NMN or NAD,
Yeah.
one of those?
Yeah. We see small effects with that, but not big effects. We see rapamycin. We can repeat that in our animal models. And we've seen that metformin can be repeated. As I mentioned, urolithin A. Spermidine is
Okay.
another molecule that seems to have another molecule I think is very interesting, and it has effects on fertility as well. And then a range of drugs that we tested as well. So not all of this is published yet, but we're still looking at IP. So I can't talk about the drugs in too much detail. But
Are any of maybe you can answer this, but are any of the drugs like anti-fibrotic drugs to help with some of the thickening of the ovarian
we
tissue or
took
stiffening?
molecules, we took drugs that have been reported to affect aging generally.
Okay.
And so I'm not sure we tested any of those. I have to go back and look. So we tested a large number of things. They're not all in my head at the moment, but
Yeah.
those would be interesting candidates for sure. So,
Yeah. I mean, because it seems as though one of the mechanisms, we have the mitochondrial decline,
yeah.
the stiffening of the ovarian tissue
Yeah.
itself,
Yeah.
a shift to more sympathetic state
Yeah.
in the ovaries.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
just a
I mean,
few.
we were trying to ask a specific question. Are geroprotectors more likely to affect ovarian aging than just random molecules? And we found a very strong, robust connection there. But we didn't look at the wide range of things just from an ovarian perspective. So we could go back and try to do that. One of the things we're doing right now, I never thought I would say this, is that half my lab is AI now. So
Yeah.
we're doing a lot of drug screening sort of in silico, looking at large language models and interrogating drugs that might affect longevity. We're doing that with peptides now. I think peptides are a really exciting space too. And we're also using transcriptomic data and omic type data to try to find new drugs that affect longevity. So we have a couple papers that are under review looking at that now too. I think that's really exciting. The uses of AI are in the field are just expanding as we go. I'm not sure I'm going to be necessary much longer, but that's okay.
No, I don't think so. To go back to the ovarian aging real quick.
Sorry.
So what have you found most efficacious so far?
Yeah. Well, we're really looking at. I mean, I think first of all, I would start with Yushin's study on rapamycin. That's a short-term clinical study in women looking at AMH levels and other hormone levels. It's not looking at fertility. I mean, there's some concern about using an mTOR inhibitor in women that are trying to get pregnant because they could affect early development. But I think in terms of the data, it's very promising for ovarian aging. And then, I think some of the supplements look really promising as well. And those are things that people could take and are less risky. So the AKG, the NAD, the precursors, those things are available and may be beneficial. Spermidine's available. So, we try to balance it, right? Because ultimately finding new drugs might have bigger effect than supplements. But supplements are available now and can be commercialized now. And so we want to have an impact now. And also look at things that might have a bigger impact later. We've also looked at strategies where we could target things specifically to ovaries. So, and we're trying different antibody-driven strategies to do that. So that might be a way to get a bigger effect specifically in ovaries. Because if you have a molecule you can't dose too high, then if you target it directly to ovaries, you might get rid of some of the side effects associated with it.
Yeah. Well, is it reasonable to say that the ovaries also could be a good model to understand aging better as a whole, considering it is an organ that ages so rapidly in comparison to?
Yeah, the ovaries and the thymus are the two things that seem to age very quickly in the body. And that some of the thymic effects may be having a lot of downstream effects on inflammation, later in aging. But, it's crazy. We've ignored reproductive aging, particularly female reproductive aging. People probably over the years doing research with not enough X chromosomes, but but we need to go back and rethink about that because it's really an area that's ripe for experimental exploitation. I think we can learn a lot about reproductive aging, about aging in general, from doing studies and looking at ovarian function.
Yeah. Well,
and male reproductive aging too.
Yes.
But I think that what's missing right now is the ovarian studies. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, big thing that I've always been about is like this mitigation or reduction of like environmental toxins.
Yeah.
But there's, some good research out there that shows higher levels of different PFAS, environmental toxins equals shorter reproductive, timeline.
Yeah.
So I think that's again something we can do now. We can have less of that in our environments.
Yeah, and I really hope that becomes more mainstream because, as an individual, it's difficult to do that. You've accomplished a lot of that, I think, but there's a lot of effort that goes into that.
Yeah.
How do we scale this so that everybody's exposed to less toxins? And right now there's just not enough acceptance, and we have, politics around the world that are driving us in the wrong direction in terms of, cleaning up our environment and the exposure we have to different things. And I hope we can start to change that.
I know. I mean, and also, are you friends with David Furman?
Yeah, David and I know each other pretty well.
Yeah.
So.
He was on the pod a while back, I think, and like when we were both in Gestad for the Longevity Investors Conference or something. But
I didn't go last year, so
yeah, I didn't go last year either. But I think it was the year before. David and I were both there, maybe. But he told me he thinks like that microplastics are like one of the largest threats to humanity. So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of doctors are talking about this now. Like Jordan Schlane, and he spends a lot of his time trying to reduce microplastic exposure, and it's not as easy as you might think. I think that we need to, and that's an emerging field. We need to pay attention because it's probably accelerating our aging. Although, sometimes people are very resistant. One of the things that strikes me is how much life expectancy was going up in China during this, heavy pollution. I mean, pollution's got better in China recently, but life expectancy from like 1990 to 2010 was going up dramatically. And arguably, people in China live as long as Americans do, and they're exposed to a lot more pollution on average. So we need to be more nuanced about it too. We need to understand what the toxins are, what the effect is, and which things we need to get rid of, because we're not going to go back to Eden. we need to be strategic about how we reduce exposure, and so there's a lot of research that has to be done. But I agree with you. I think microplastics are a big concern right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I try to test like kind of everything that I can. And I've been doing this total toxic burden test. Have you ever done that one?
I haven't done that. I've had some toxins measured. And so,
it's pretty comprehensive. I mean, I love it. I always want to veer on the side of caution. Like, let's just have no high level of toxins. Measures BPA and glyphosate and parabens and phthalates and PFAS and molds and mycotoxins, all sorts of stuff. So I love that test because a lot of times people can be living next to, let's say, some sort of manufacturing plant. They have no clue, but they're getting exposed to this really high level of X chemical. And if you know, then you can make different life choices.
And also just mold. I mean, that's the big effect on people, and a lot of people don't realize it. It's So, but all of these things I think are relevant, and I think we could stop worrying about windmills and start worrying about these things. It would be great.
Yeah, I agree. To go back to the rapamycin, is the mechanism of why it could be extending the ovarian longevity. Is it because there's less eggs being recruited, and then less eggs are...
Well, there's certainly inflammatory stress going on in ovaries, so it's doing that. It's probably stimulating more better egg development, let's say, in ovaries, and so you can see better egg quality in preclinical models when you look. And better proteostasis is going to be beneficial increased turnover of damaged proteins, oxidized proteins, all of these things. Rapamycin is linked to all of these things. And this is why people don't like interviewing me, because all of these longevity interventions, I can point to every hallmark of aging with them, and so it's hard to give a specific answer. But I think that you certainly see elevated mTOR signaling in ovaries, with age, and elevated baseline signaling, mTOR signaling in ovaries, whether it's in muscle, whether it's in the brain, it's contributing to aging. So turning that back down is going to have broad stream benefits.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the interventions that I want to, test after hyperbaric is red light therapy, strategically, maybe knocking down the oxidative stress. And because we know that we have that inflammatory cascade that occurs in the ovaries at X periods of time, maybe if you dampen that, that could be beneficial.
Yeah, I think that it's how to penetrate the red light to the tissue is the challenge. So I've tried red light therapy just on skin. There's some good data on that. I don't think it's completely convincing yet, but I think it's worth looking at more and maybe worth trying. But delivering it into the body is a bigger challenge, and so that's the concern there. I think cryotherapy is interesting too. I don't know if you've tried that.
I've tried it for
It's the going into the -87 room for 3 minutes. It's you definitely feel better immediately after you leave the room.
Oh yeah, you feel it increases dopamine. I don't know that there's.
It does, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we know that we have like data on cold water immersion. I don't know if we have as much on cryotherapy, but I would assume it's like somewhat similar. But I mean, the increase in dopamine and like norepinephrine are really good. But yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. Because we don't have a lot of information on this, I kind of just have to, I do a lot of like first principles thinking, I suppose, what could potentially.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
I mean, it's all we've really got right now. So
yeah, it's good. And one of the reasons, we started a consulting company, Live Beyond, and one of the reasons we did it is because we want to work with clinics that are doing these things. We want to see what they're doing, and whether they're effective or not. So we get to look at data. And we can't always publish it sometimes we can, but we can at least see what's happening, because a lot of these therapies are really expensive right now, but you could scale them. If we had data that they're working, we could really scale it. And what we're doing at NUS is really about, democratizing longevity. The interventions we're testing are repurposed drugs, or they're supplements that are relatively cheap. The biomarkers we're using, we're trying to keep that at a cost-effective level so that we can deliver something to the whole Singapore population. But at the other end of the spectrum, you have stem cell therapies and gene therapy and all kinds of other things that right now are not scalable to the population. But I just want to see the efficacy data there. If they work, we'll figure out a way to do it. So.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on therapeutic plasma exchange?
I think it's really intriguing. I haven't tried that myself yet, but people that have, I think, are pretty positive about it. And there is some, I think, pretty credible published data that you get longevity benefits from it. So I'm not ready to say I'm 100% behind it, but I think the data's getting there. So.
Yeah, I did it. I had like an interesting end of one experience because I did it smack dab in the LA fire. So I had the highest toxic burden.
Maybe a good time to do it.
I mean, it was a great time for me personally, but also the information I thought was, so I had about an 11% reduction. So I did a total toxic burden the day that I got the TPE before it. And then I did it a week after. So I had about an 11% reduction. Obviously some of the categories higher than others. But then I had another interesting thing. So after that LA fire, for the first time ever, my TPO antibodies started to increase. They became detectable. They were 12 and then 20. And I just think that was kind of like a massive overload. But after I did the TPE, they went back down to undetectable and they stayed there. So that was a pretty cool finding for me personally.
I have Matt and I a lot. Caberline and I debate sort of what tier we put different interventions in, and I think we both are pretty positive on TPE. So.
And do you think the in-use pheresis? Do you know about that as well? So
Say again.
In-use pheresis. It's not available here, but in Europe.
What is this?
It's more of like a targeted. So right now with therapeutic plasma exchange, you can either do it by removing all your plasma and then replacing it with albumin or partial.
Yeah.
But this is supposed to be more of like a targeted, like let's say you want to
You're filtering out specific things.
Yeah, microplastics.
Yeah.
But you also get the plasma back, which I like because
Yeah.
I do have some questions about this albumin that's going back into the body,
Yeah. I agree. I haven't looked into those specifically, but conceptually, I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
Question is, do we know exactly what we should be removing? We know some things that are good to remove, but will you get the same benefit that you get from removing everything? On the other hand, you're keeping your plasma, which is good. So we just don't know when we're comparing these things right now, which are better. And that's what we need to get serious about, measuring this data. And I think that everything from supplement companies to device companies, they're less motivated to do the full-scale clinical studies that need to be done. And I understand why. They don't have a $1 billion, pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. If you're developing a drug, you can spend a lot of money on the clinical trials because you make a fortune if it gets approved for whatever indication. But with these sectors of the market, there's that the economic profile is different. So a supplement, you're going to have competition. Other people are going to be selling it. It's going to be hard to capture the market completely and raise the price to wherever you need to make a profit. So at the beginning, you do less clinical studies, and then there's less data on whether it works or not. We need to find some way to deal with that. I feel like, the drugs, we've put the bar too high on getting them approved. It's almost impossible to get a drug approved now. And we're probably missing out on things that work for subpopulations with different diseases because we're setting that bar too high. On the supplements, we need a way to get more rigorous testing done to figure out what works in which people. I mean, like I said, I found things that work for me, but that combination may not work for you. And we need to figure out what works in which people. And there has to be resources that allow us to test that. And right now, either on the private sector or the academic sector, there aren't sufficient resources to test these things.
Why does it cost so much money to get, some of this research done?
Well, it depends on what kind of research you're talking about. If we're talking about preclinical research, animals cost a fortune to keep. It's a couple dollars a day for every mouse I have. And if you're doing a longevity study, they're alive for almost 3 years, or some of them are alive for longer than 3 years. So, and you have to do a lot of animals to show an effect. So it might be 200 animals. So you can add the cost. Cost adds up really quickly.
Why do they cost so much money to keep alive?
My team recently told me that only 50% of you that actually watch this video are subscribers. If you watch this content and you enjoy it, I would really appreciate a quick subscribe. Take a second to do it now, because the more subscribers we get, the better the podcast, the better the video content can be. So would really appreciate that. Now back to the video.
Because you have to keep them in a pathogen-free vivarium, so they're highly monitored. They cost a lot of money to keep the airflow correct in the building, and there are a lot of different things that you have to do in a high research grade animal facility. Now there are people that do studies at universities and other parts of the world that don't have those facilities. Typically, animals don't live very long in those conditions. So that you could think of that as a good thing. Your studies are faster, but the problem is you don't know they're dying of normal age-related pathologies. They could be getting some kind of cancer from exposure. They could be getting viral infections that are killing them. So we tend to work in pristine settings where we have a long wild-type lifespan. And then if we can extend that, that means that we're probably slowing aging. If we're doing things to shorten the lifespan and then compensating for that, we don't know why they're dying in the first place, so it may not be aging. So that's one of the reasons. The human clinical trials just costs a lot of money. Recruiting people, all the controls and ethics approvals that go into that, and the money adds up fast. And if you're doing a stage 3 clinical trial on a drug, you've got a large number of subjects, probably multi-center study, because you want to see that the findings are reproducible across different sites. And so it's money. I mean, I'm generally supportive of pharmaceutical companies. Okay, I think the vast majority of people in these companies are really trying to do the right thing, and they're really trying to make people have better lives. But the industry has gotten skewed toward taking care of sick people and not keeping healthy people healthy. And we need to do something about that. And, I've even had conversations where I talked to a high-level person at a pharmaceutical company, and they actually said to me, well, great, if you give me a drug that slows aging, that's good. I'll make a lot of money off that drug, but I'm going to lose money on all my other drugs to treat these chronic diseases. We need to fix that problem. They're problems driven economically. You can say that about hospitals too. Hospitals make money in the U.S. off doing procedures on people.
Yeah.
If you keep everybody healthy, the hospitals are going to have less business. And so there has to be some sort of strategy that focuses on people's long-term health. And I don't mean sick care, I mean health care. And right now, the economic incentives are not aligned with getting that done.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for now, it just needs to be like a lot of personal responsibility.
Yeah, that's right. You have to invest in your health. And I know that's easier for some people than others. And I know it's expensive for some people, depending on how far you want to go down that path.
Yeah.
But, finding a little bit of time during the day to make sustainable changes, if that's all you can do, that already helps, Eating a little bit healthier. Another thing I think is people should be wearing these continuous glucose monitors, not all the time, but maybe once a year, because they tell you how your body reacts to what you're eating.
Yeah.
It's an educational tool for the person wearing it. And it helped me have a better diet after, because I learned that what I react to and what I don't react to.
I love those, I think.
Yeah. So these are little things that don't cost much that teach you how to live better lives. And I think that's a good place to start for people that don't have a lot of time and money to target the more cutting edge things right now. Of course, if you can do that, that's great too.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, the things that move the needle the most are like free or low cost. I would say they just require like a consistent discipline with them.
Yeah.
And I have found, that because people always just want to ask me, like, what supplements are you taking? What NAD protocol? And it's like, well, you shouldn't even be thinking about that right now. I mean, if you want to, but you got to master these other, like go to bed at the same time every day and, the basic things. But people don't want to do that.
I'm not good at that, so don't tell me.
People don't want to do that because that's hard and it's not fun.
Yeah.
And then, I think a lot too about like the industry, I feel like right now is being painted as a very like rich person only situation, which, obviously like we're sitting in front of a hyperbaric chamber. It can be, but there's also just so many things that you can do that aren't. And also, people should think about, and not saying this in any judgmental way, but like what is your budget for alcohol like per month?
No
like
comment.
Yeah. You don't have an alcohol budget, do you?
I drink wine. Yeah.
Okay, you drink wine. That's okay. I mean, for me, it's zero. So
that's a big discussion we could have. But I think zero is healthy. I'm not sure whether moderate intake is healthy or not. But we can come back to that.
Well, I mean,
you're making a different point.
It's. I thought that was answered now. Has that not been answered now? Is it zero better than
It's like a pendulum. It swings too far in one direction, and everybody's saying 3 glasses a day is good for you.
I know.
It swings
so crazy.
But then it swings probably too far the other direction and saying that you should not have one drop. I'm happy to delve into that. But I think your other point, though, is where are you spending money and where could it be better spent is a really good question to ask. And I think, people are busy. They've got stressed out lives, but little things make differences. You don't have to accomplish everything at once.
Yeah.
If you can find little changes you can make that are sustainable, ideally they're things you enjoy. Yeah. Some kind of exercise you enjoy is better than the perfect exercise you don't enjoy, at least to start. So those kinds of things, if you can accomplish those things at small levels, they fill you with confidence and they allow you to do bigger things. And so everybody should be starting somewhere, and it's very personalized, but it has to be, something generally that you don't mind doing. I think most people, if they don't like doing something, they won't continue doing it. I
mean, I would also say at that point, like maybe changing your mindset a little bit. Like Like I have this mindset, obviously a lot of people think I have a super boring life. They're like, how do you even have any fun whatsoever?
Yeah.
But I enjoy like going to bed early, feeling amazing. I enjoy like I have a I get to mentality around working out. Like I get to work out. I get to push my body. That's so cool. How many people on this planet don't have that opportunity?
Yeah, I feel the same way about the exercise, especially. Running is mindfulness for me.
So good.
And I started doing resistance training about 5 years ago, and it builds confidence in me. You can see the effect of it, and there's certain aspects of it I don't love, but I love the effect I get, and it's
And you
worth
feel
it to me.
better too, right?
I feel a lot better.
So it's like compounding
Yeah,
on itself, which I love.
Yeah, and when you can start doing pull-ups again and things like that, it just feels good. It gives you belief that you're gonna, can do other things that'll keep you healthy. So I agree. To me, exercise is like, especially running, because I'm not good at meditation. I can't, my mind's in 20 places at once. But when I'm doing a long run, that's when I can really focus my mind and sort of let a lot of stuff go. And so to me, it accomplishes multiple goals at the same time.
Yeah. What do you think about biomarkers such as VO2 max? I mean, we've heard a lot of chatter about that being one of the best biomarkers
Yeah.
for longevity, grip strength,
Yeah.
gait speed, all that stuff.
Yeah, I think we can take those one at a time. I think VO2 max, I on the one hand, it is a great biomarker of long-term health. On the other hand, you need qualified individuals to effectively measure this. Now, my Whoop estimates it, and my Garmin estimates it. They don't agree much with each other, but they
How
estimate
far?
it.
I've never used a Garmin.
I
What's the
think
difference?
by Garmin, well, right now I'm 44,
Okay.
and Whoop is closer to 40. So I guess it's not that different. But these things are imperfect measures, and so trends probably might be interesting, but I don't think they're great at measuring. They're calculating it based on other parameters.
Yeah.
If you're really trying to measure VO2, and by the way, I really like Whoop. I don't get paid by them. I like the sleep data I get from it. I like you got it. I like the cardiovascular data I get from it. It's starting to try to measure health span, and I don't think it's very well. It measures a very limited set of parameters, so it's not very accurate at biologic age yet. But for the other parameters, I think it's great. I think Aura is great too. I just don't like rings, so I like this personally.
I mean, I love Whoop for like performance stuff, but from a like measuring basal body temperature as ovulation stuff, it's great with Aura.
Yeah.
But I love the component of Whoop that it can tell you what to do to improve your biological age. I think for the general population, that's like
that's
super
good.
powerful.
Yeah. Although I get in arguments with it, because it's like, it's always saying to me, your physical function is great, everything's great, but your sleep's terrible. And because I'm traveling all the time, for one thing, and the other thing is, I've slept 5 to 6 hours a night ever since I can remember. That's just the amount of sleep that I can normally get.
And some people have that gene, right? The short sleep gene.
Yeah, I mean, some people are much more extreme than that.
Yeah.
I've never tested my genetics on this, but that's just how I sleep very deeply for 5 to 6 hours, and then that's it. I don't sleep during the day. I'm not tired. And then on top of that, I'm switching time zones all the time. So it's like constantly telling me my sleep debt, And so eventually I said, listen, it's not helping me to tell me my sleep debt all the time, and because I'm not going to change it. This is how I've always been. You need to work around that to give me, advice that helps me, and it came back in a conversation with me, and it said, oh, I understand where you are and everything. And then 2 minutes later, it said, you need to get more sleep.
Well, I don't think they're there yet. They're not like at that
But
hopefully in the future.
I'm being critical, but I actually really like using it, and it integrates, with I can enter a lot of my behaviors. Some are a little too personal, but I can enter a lot of my daily behaviors into the Whoop, and it tries to correlate that. What I would really like to see is the statistics it does on your behaviors, like did you do HBOT today, or what drugs you took. It asks a lot of those questions, but then it does sort of one-off statistics. If you took this drug, your sleep was better or something. What it needs to do is integrate all of those things and find patterns among the behaviors, and not just one versus one. So I'm hoping it can do that in the near future, but generally I'm very positive about it. And I think people wearing them, they get a lot of information that's useful.
Yeah. One thing that I found super cool about HBOT is that as soon as I get in, it logs me. As soon as it's pressurized, it logs as restored.
Yeah.
So really seems to be ultra parasympathetic for me.
Yeah.
And I've seen that repeat on a lot of people that have come over and done it. And I find that to be so beneficial because we know stress is a big one, and specifically for women reporting higher levels of stress. So
What about HRV? Do you follow that closely?
It
I
doesn't.
think that's an important one to look at.
Oh yeah.
Varies a lot. You have to look at averages, but I think it's an important measure of health.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I did a whole so from 2023 to 2024 to 2025, I was benchmarking my stress levels. So stress logged and HRV.
Yeah.
And I was able to make such a meaningful, change in HRV with just some relatively simple practices, to be honest. So
that's another parameter I look at pretty closely. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
I think resting heart rate's another one that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, mine's like for high 40s, mid 40s.
Yeah,
so
me too.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But a lot of people just significantly higher.
Yeah, I think coming back to the VO2 max, I didn't answer your question though, is that it's a measurement challenge. So if you're measuring on a treadmill and you're ramping the treadmill up or stairs or bike or whatever, a lot of people, they don't want to go. They don't know what exhaustion is. You need to go to exhaustion, but they quit too early, and then you're trying to extrapolate and guess. And so, I think VO2 max is great, but it's easy to measure in athletes because they know where their exhaustion levels are.
Yeah.
But it's not so easy to measure in a general population, and so you really need good qualified people to get an accurate measurement there. But I think that it's a very meaningful number. Grip strength is a little bit like that too. I mean, it's if you try grip strength tests, it's painful, right? And so it's really a combination of strength and pain tolerance, Yeah. And so, but these measurements are, I think VO2 max, if it's done right, is a better measurement than grip strength. But all of these strength measurements have value.
Yeah, and grip strength is so easy to do at home.
It is.
It's like the thing costs like $30, and you can just do it at home, which I enjoy. Like I have a set of things that I do at home, like lung health, like a spirometer, grip strength, which I mean, my grip strength's like 106. So for like a woman, it's
good.
like incredibly high. Yeah. And I don't train grip strength, obviously. But yeah, these are like nice things. I have this new cool blood pressure monitor too. It's called Connect. So it also looks at some other measurements. It's supposed to be looking at some like arterial flexibility. I'll show it to you if you have.
Yeah, you have to tell me about that one. I want to get a good blood pressure monitor.
Yeah, it's really nice. But it's interesting because the ranges are based off of like a general population. So like I'm falling below the range like every single time, which is good. But, according to my cardiovascular friends and doctors, but we need to have better longevity metrics on all of these type of things.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they fit things to averages. I mean, that's all they can do.
But we don't want to be average because the average is like not good at all. So.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite biomarkers to look at? Like if someone's listening to this from a longevity standpoint, if you had, 5 to 10, what would they be?
Well, we mentioned a bunch of them already.
Yeah.
If you can really go get that VO2 max, I think that's important.
Okay.
HRV, heart rate, all these things are highly relevant, at least to many aspects of aging. They may not be telling you everything. I'm looking a lot. I would say the biologic aging clocks, you should pick one or two of them to measure if you're going to really go all out. So Lineage we love, of course, but there are others available.
Yeah.
Then I'm looking into some of the cancer screening tests right now. I just did Lucence, which is they screen for circular DNA markers of different cancers of cells, the different cells in the bloodstream.
I've been doing the Grail liquid biopsy, but I think they just got I feel like they just got a bad.
I'm still not sure how accurate those things are, but I think that we're talking about people that want to go all out. That's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
I think Dexa is good. Bioimpedance is okay, but it's variable. But Dexa is great to tell you about your health.
Yeah, especially for women, so important to do it early. I think most women are getting a Dexa scan at the age of 65, which is when it becomes.
Yeah, it's pretty late. Yeah.
It's super late. I mean, what bone density peaks, I think, at 30. So even a little earlier.
And there are other types of bone density measures that are good. I mean, certainly, you should be doing your standard screening. I mean, colonoscopies and, those things are I'm not talking about those because we're talking about longevity, but don't skip the basics to go to the advanced. I don't know about full body MRIs. I'm more skeptical of those because the people I know that take them, they always get some finding, and then it increases their anxiety, and then most of the time it's not a meaningful finding for downstream pathology. So I don't necessarily recommend that. So what else?
I'm on the fence because I'm in such a unique position. So like I've gotten full body MRIs now every year for the past 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
First one I ever got they found a couple of white matter changes and they've never progressed or anything. Something must have occurred when I was younger. But anyways, at that time, they didn't really have much data on it. So they sent me down this like crazy rabbit hole.
You're doing all this testing and
exactly. And I don't get rattled too easily. So I think, but some people really could.
Yes, definitely.
And then there was another time, like, the last one that I got, they thought that they found a finding. But I was able to just pick up the phone and get another image the same day. So I was really quickly. But yeah, for a standard person not able to do that, then they would be like stressed about it.
I'm not sure. I think it's a mixed bag, definitely.
I mean, I think the future of it could be really interesting for early detection, but I think
and then now, there's genetic screening and other things that are pretty standard now that are if you really want to know, I mean, these are things to be, you need to know your ApoE status. I mean, it's like your risk for Alzheimer's is, if you have, this is another thing that people say is non-actionable. They say, what if I have 2 ApoE4 alleles? It's 12-fold increased risk of Alzheimer's. What am I going to do about it? Well, one thing you can do is take lifestyle much more seriously.
Yeah, I know, exactly right.
So there are things you can do about, we know that exercise impacts onset of dementia, and so there are things that it is actionable and you should know, I think that, these kinds of things are, I want to know as much information as I can.
Same.
But I think that's generally a healthy approach.
If you were to choose like one, I guess blood chemistry marker from each kind of section, like would you say like LP(a) and then maybe ApoB from a cardiovascular standpoint, from like a metabolic health standpoint, would you want to look at like insulin or a HOMA-IR? Like what would that kind of look like?
I think those are all good. It's like, I think, HbA1c is a simple marker. It doesn't change that much. It's easy for people to do. I think it's a pretty good parameter to start at as entry level for metabolic health. Certainly going to, more, insulin, glucose tolerance, insulin resistance, all these things are better. But just HbA1c is a good start. And I use that a lot. I was at 5.2 and then I'm taking SGLT2 inhibitor now. I'm trying to see if I can get it, how much down it's going to come.
Nice. You'll have to tell me what the results are on that.
Yeah, it's only down to 5.1, but I only took it like 2 months. So it's not really enough time for it to change yet. And I don't know if that's meaningful yet. So that's simple. I think the question is, what are the good entry point measurements? And I think ApoB and LPA are both, like, the data on those are really compelling, and not enough people measure those markers. People still measure cholesterol and HDL and LDL maybe, and think that's enough. And I have high cholesterol, but my LPA is really low, and ApoB's not that bad. So I'm like not ready to go on a medication for that. So it's my HDL is super high. So triglycerides are really low because I run a lot. So it's, for me, it's like I want to go get some imaging to see what my arteries look like. But
like a Clearly or something.
I want to do Clearly. That's what I've been told. I haven't tried it yet, but that's something that
I've done that one.
I think if I look fine there, I'm gonna just not take medication for it.
I mean, it's such the cardiovascular conversation is just all over the place. But I mean, it seems like seems that there's an indication that it's a metabolic issue, not just a cholesterol issue on its own. But I mean, where do you fall on that? So, I mean, there's obviously different schools of thoughts on where I genetically have an elevated LP(a). So there's that. So I have to have that risk profile look a little different.
Yeah.
But Where do you think like ApoB needs to be, where would you feel comfortable? Like at like
Yeah,
30 or 60 or
you're, I, I'm hesitant to answer that because I don't have enough knowledge of the actual
okay.
numbers.
Yeah, we
Certainly,
can
the
always
lower
try
the
to
better, but I don't
yeah.
know. I haven't looked at it carefully enough. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'm just transparent.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
It's like I work in so many different
Yeah.
areas of the field that I don't have the detailed knowledge sometimes. So I'd rather just be honest about it
Yeah.
than
Okay.
give you an answer.
I think that the lab cutoff is like 80
Yeah,
or
yeah,
so.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then,
yeah,
but
yeah.
there's
But I
obviously,
don't know whether 30 is better than 60 or not. I assume it is, but I don't know
yeah.
the data on it. So,
Yeah. It's a good,
yeah.
but then it's all like we believe that ApoB is causal for
Yeah.
cardiovascular disease, but then where does this metabolic role come into
Yeah,
play?
I don't think we have enough understanding of that. I would look, I think the link between metabolism, metabolic function, and aging is super strong.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're just going to fix one thing,
Mm-hmm.
make sure your metabolic health is ideal, because and that can be done with lifestyle or drugs or supplement. There's a lot of ways to do it, but if your metabolic health isn't ideal, you're taking a big risk for aging. So.
Yeah. And I think the stats on that are pretty grim. I think it's like 6% of
Yeah.
Americans at least have like between the five
Ideal.
criteria have optimal metabolic
Yeah.
health.
I mean, this is what's so frustrating about the American healthcare system. I mean, there's low-hanging fruit here, but there's so many perverse incentives, like people selling unhealthy food and healthcare system designed to treat sick people, and politicians that may or may not care about the population. It's just so frustrating that we can't do better than what we're doing. I can't believe that life expectancy in the U.S. is the last statistic I saw, we were 60th in the world. I mean, seriously.
60th?
Yeah.
And it's going down. Is that real that it's going down now?
Well, it was starting to trend down. And COVID kind of complicated that, but it was starting to trend down. But it's going to trend back up with these GLP-1 and SGLT2 drugs, and they're effective. I read there were 18% of American households somebody's taking it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and for people that need it, it's going to help them, I think. So this is going to probably have a positive impact on life expectancy, but it's going to be affecting the life expectancy by hitting the people that are dying earlier and pushing them more toward normal.
Yeah.
Whether it pushes normal further or not, as we discussed, is still an open question. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hope just like, sarcopenia rates don't just like start.
Yeah. I've asked like 20 doctors now, do GLP-1 agonists accelerate muscle decline faster than other weight loss strategies? And I've got 20 different answers. So I don't know.
Is there any grouping that you like?
Well, I mean, most doctors will at least say that any strategy you use to lose weight, diet, metformin, they will cause loss of muscle mass. And so you need to complement that with things that increase muscle strength. For people that are not sarcopenic already, that's exercise. Even for people that have sarcopenia, exercise can probably help. But in terms of whether you proportionally lose muscle weight more with GLP-1, I haven't heard a consistent answer yet. So.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder how many doctors are actually measuring the muscle loss on a consistent
they should
basis.
be, because if you go from obese to less obese with less muscle, I don't know how much better that is. Muscle is highly protective. It's metabolically protective, and certainly strength protects you from a lot of other complications with aging too. So.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think these GLP-1s are things that people are just going to be on for the rest of their life?
Depends on the person.
Yeah.
I think that the problem is a lot that people go off of them and then they gain weight again, and so.
And they don't add on a lot of the muscle that they lost.
And they don't add back the muscle, so it can be worse. Yeah. Maybe they may be, but that's still probably better than, at least for people that were obese and had poor metabolic health, it's still probably better.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about peptides.
Yeah.
Super controversial Feels like they just became ultra exciting to people like relatively recently.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on
Well,
peptides? Then there's some legislation change that I
yeah.
think we're going to get a bunch of peptides back now.
Yeah. I look, first of all, the promise of peptides has been totally underappreciated. Let's look at some of the insulin, GLP-1.
Yeah.
These are effective drugs. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are, 20,000, 50,000 proteins in the cell, depending on how you define one distinct protein from another. Any of those proteins could be parsed into small peptides. So there's almost an infinite collection of different peptides to use. And we haven't done enough research on them. These are active molecules. They stay around in the body. They do things. The body makes them to do things. You're just augmenting that, In some cases, you're using peptides from plants and stuff too, I realize. But these are natural things in the body that have activity. So the promise of peptides, I think, is tremendous. And unfortunately, most of the research has been done in places that didn't have the resources to really test them. So, and the big challenge right now is we're just doing a LLM-based screen for peptides that are likely to affect longevity. And first of all, we found over 200 peptides that have been linked to longevity in some way or another in the literature. But the amount of research on them is, for the most part, there are, excluding GLP-1 and stuff, the amount of research on them is extremely small. Yeah. So we don't have enough knowledge to know which peptides are doing that. But I think that field shows a tremendous amount of promise. The other challenge right now is where you source your peptides from. Yeah, you need to get them from someplace you trust that can make them, and usually they're injectable. There's some peptides now that are being developed for oral delivery, but I still think that science is even more untested than the direct delivery subcutaneously. So I'm worried about safety. So I think I think most of the safety probably comes from contaminated material, not from the peptide itself, but that's a big concern. And then we need more data to figure out which peptides are having the biggest effect on aging. I'm very confident some of these peptides are likely to be working, but I'm not willing to make bets on specific things right now because there just isn't sufficient. There's not sufficient data. And one of the things we're thinking about in our lab, even in the preclinical setting, is to focus much more on peptides now because there's a lot out there that's promising, I think.
What are the LLMs identifying as the top potential longevity peptides?
Yeah, well, we're just working through that process right now, so stay tuned.
Okay.
I can't even tell you because I haven't seen the latest data. We're getting different iterations of that data, but we're not at a level of confidence yet that even I believe it. So
okay. Well, you'll have to let me know. Yeah. Have you ever tried a peptide yourself?
Yeah. Let's see. I had a really bad viral infection, so I took, I think it was BPC and 157, I think. Okay. And then a couple other peptides in combination, and it reduced...
Thymosin alpha, was that another?
Yeah, that was one of them. Yeah. And it reduced my... it didn't stop the virus, but it reduced the side effects, so I got less nausea and things like that almost very quickly. So yeah.
I've been doing peptides, on and off for, 7-8 years. Always doctor prescription, compounded at an FDA approved facility.
That's the key, I think.
I've been offered so much, so much money by like these gray market peptides, and I'm like, absolutely not. I don't trust it at all.
And some of them are probably fine. It's just really hard to know.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you do your own independent testing on them, you just don't know. And it's I fear about that for safety. Actually, a huge one of those companies. Yeah. Now that it's been announced that those 14 peptides are coming back. Yeah. They've shut down now. It's interesting. Really? Like Peptide Sciences was the biggest one. I've never ordered anything from there, but they've been like historically.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
And they're shut down now. Maybe they feel like they made all their money and they're just good for who knows.
I don't know the story.
But I will say, so when I did all my international travel last year, I was taking Thymosin alpha. And I did not get sick one time. I was really astounded because all those planes, all those people,
Yeah.
time changes, lack of sleep, all that, but not even a single time. And even when, my husband and everybody else that I knew was like ultra sick, I didn't get sick.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just N of one, but there was that. And then I, at my old house in LA, I smashed my finger in this like ultra heavy door, and I started injecting BPC into my hand, and it fractured. So I had an X-ray that it was fractured.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later from doing that
Yeah, it's
injection,
interesting.
it was like, I mean, not only did it feel great, but it also looked great on the X-ray. So like, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. No, that's, I mean, I think that we should pay a lot of attention to these peptides, and we're trying to work much harder to figure out which ones to test for which things, and really how do we get real meaningful data on mechanism and credibility, to improve credibility, because I think they're going to be as good as drugs, and we just ignored this for the most part relative to drug development.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What are your thoughts on gene therapy?
Also very promising. I'm not supportive of doing it now. Because I'm not sure that the technology's there yet to cause an effect. I mean, certainly gene therapy. The funny thing is that when I was in the 8th grade, I decided I wanted to be a molecular biologist, and probably a bad time to make that decision. I mean, it turned out okay, but but I read this book on gene therapy, so that so that was 1980, and it was going to change everything. And I'd say only in the last 5 to 10 years do we have effective gene therapies to treat sort of rare childhood diseases and stuff. And so I think we're on the steep edge of the learning curve now, or not the learning curve, but maybe the usage curve for gene therapy, but still at that early stage. And you can make a case for telomerase, and Liz Parrish is a good friend of mine.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, you can make a case for the muscle, the follistatin. Yeah. I think they're interesting targets, but I'm not sure that follistatin is going to extend lifespan, and I'm not convinced that they're that efficacious yet. So I'm supportive of the concept. I want to see it develop, but I'm not encouraging people to go spend a lot of money doing it yet. So.
Yeah, that was one of the things. I'm always gauging risk and reward, and that was one thing that I decided to definitely hold off on, because I mean, number one, I haven't had kids. Number two, I'm 35. Like, there's a whole bunch of reasons, but I was curious to hear.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way, and I also think there's a huge rejuvenation, stem cell rejuvenation therapies. I think are very promising, and they have the potential maybe to have even bigger effects than the other things we've been talking about, but. How easy it is to develop that into a safe therapeutic approach, I think, is unclear yet. But that concept, I think, is very interesting. And
do you think, well, number one, curious, any subtype of stem cells that you're most excited about, whether that be,
So this is sort of reprogramming I'm talking about.
Okay.
But I'm happy to talk about stem cells too.
Well, first let's talk about the reprogramming. Yeah. Isn't there did something major just happen? I haven't read it, but there's specific researcher that I think something just happened with cellular reprogramming, that it was a big deal. But
I haven't seen the latest studies. I think that the challenge is, how do you reprogram cells so that they are, promoting youth again, repopulating tissues without being carcinogenic on their own. And I think that we just don't know how hard that's going to be. When it's the same way with senolytics, right? So like 50 years ago, we said, even more than 50 years ago, we said cancer cells are different than normal cells. If we can just exploit the differences with cancer cells, we can kill the cancer cells and leave the normal cells, and we'll cure cancer. And so over the years, we've declared war on cancer, I don't know how many times now. Still have cancer. It's not that concept is bad. It's that it's really hard to specifically target cancer cells and not harm normal cells. I mean, I don't want to criticize the field. We're much better at treating cancer than we were 50 years ago. People live with a lot of different cancers they would have died from now. So I think progress has been made, but it's hard is what I'm saying. And so then when you say we're going to kill senescent cells and leave the normal cells, The senescent cells are probably closer to the normal cells than the cancer cells are, so it's an even harder question.
Got it.
And then when you say we're going to reprogram the cells so that they're younger, but they still function normally and don't lead to cancer, we don't know how hard that's going to be. But conceptually, I think it's great. And if it works, could dramatically impact aging, I think. Now, there's stem cells you can get today, too. That's a different question. I don't know if you've tried that yet. I've had MSCs IV a couple times.
Yeah, I've done a couple. I also banked my own stem cells, so had that derived from fat, and then they've been multiplied out, and then I might use that as like, I don't know, just general IV for myself. I'm would love to hear your opinion. Really quick to go back to the reprogramming, but then you would have to reprogram the cells in every single organ, right? Like that would be.
Well, we know how to reprogram cells. We can make iPS cells. And so the question is, how do we do that in vivo in an organism in a way that's safe? And there are lots of strategies to do that. There are gene therapy strategies. There are drugs that mimic the effects of the genes that do the reprogramming people are developing. So it's early days right now. You probably don't have to reprogram every cell. If you can reprogram some cells in a tissue, you may get a lot of benefit from that. So, tissues are good at remodeling, some better than others. I mean, like brain has a very low turnover, but other tissues turn over relatively quickly. And you may not need to fix everything. You may just need to fix enough to get back over a threshold, and then the tissue can auto-regulate itself again.
Okay.
So we all interesting questions. I think that's a fascinating area of research.
Yeah, that's definitely exciting. To go back to the stem cells that are kind of available now, would you think those have promise as well for longevity?
Yeah, I haven't seen compelling data that systemic MSCs slow aging. I can believe it might happen. They're certainly anti-inflammatory, but I haven't seen data that I think is really robust yet. So optimistic, but not convinced yet. The question is same issue with the peptides. Where are you getting the stem cells from? Are the stem cells really good? What's the source? You can get them from umbilical cord. You can get them from your own bone marrow, or your own adipose. These cells they're not all exactly the same. They're similar. And which ones are going to be more beneficial? Is it better to get stem cells from the umbilical cord of a baby, that are young, or is it better to use something from your own body? I hear a lot of, again, it's a lot of noise and not consistent opinions on that. Also, there are a lot of different isolation of stem cells now, these very small stem cells and other kinds of stem cells, and those are just emerging, and they may be better than MSCs. So then there's NK cells and other things that people are doing that I think also are promising. But again, a lot of this is happening in places where there's not enough resources to get the real data. So people believe it and they're marketing it, but I can't point to studies that say, this definitely works. I think first principles, it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I guess placebo also is like a real thing. So maybe
placebo's real. Every study we do, whether people get the pill with the active ingredient or not, they get better. I think aging is and in a way that's a positive thing, right? It's telling you your aging is influenceable. Your mindset has a big effect on your age. And, we haven't talked about psychology and mental mindset and other kinds of drugs that may not quite be legal, but I think some of these things are probably good.
The psilocybin. What are your thoughts on
I think the data is really strong on psilocybin. There's animal data. It's not the best animal data. There could have been more mice and stuff like that, but it extends lifespan in mice. It looks believable. There's a lot of data on PTSD and on depression, hospice care and the interesting thing about it is single dose tends to have a long-lasting effect. And there's data that these drugs cause synaptogenesis, so it sort of helps rewire your brain. So I think we should be doing a lot more research on it. This is another example, right? We took a set of drugs and we classified those as illegal and dangerous, and some of them are dangerous.
Sure.
But psychedelics got put into that group, whereas I think there's a lot of therapeutic benefit from psychedelics, and we should maybe stop siloing molecules and start thinking them more holistically. And I don't know. I think that's a very promising set of drugs for longevity.
And why is it good for longevity?
I think it reduces anxiety in a lot of people.
Yeah.
And not just short term when you're taking it, but over a period of time. I think it allows you to see the world differently and be more accepting of the world you're in and integrated with it. I think that's one thing. If it creates synaptogenesis, that could be good, and there are other potential benefits as well. But even mice, mice have a lot of anxiety as they get older.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's hard to measure, but it's like you can sort of see it. And you can sort of measure it by the time they spend at different parts of the cage. Are they out in the open exploring things, or are they huddled in the corner? That sort of thing. And so, even in animal models, I think things like anxiety are important, and we haven't paid enough attention to it. A lot of people say that you can control a lot of your health by your mental state, and I think there's some truth to that. And psilocybin may be helping people get there.
And the dosages for people doing that seem to have, or in the mice models, it's a large dose, right? Not like a microdose over time.
Yeah, and a lot of the human clinical trials are larger doses sporadically, or even single dose. Okay. I haven't seen much data on microdosing. It's maybe I missed it, but
I haven't looked at that too much.
Yeah, I'm kind of neutral to that. I don't know yet.
Yeah, that's something I have not tried, but maybe, yeah.
Well, yeah, there's always a first time.
Yeah. Have you tried this?
Possibly.
Okay. Okay. Well, no, that's super exciting. And it would be, I think everyone could benefit from less stress and less anxiety and trying to rewire the brain.
Yeah. I mean like any drug, I think you should do it with a qualified guide.
Yeah.
Because there are bad trips. I don't think there's a lot of risk biologically to them, but you can have bad trips from them. And
how long is a trip?
Well, we're getting down a path where my
expert.
Not sure how much I want to be an expert.
This is outside of your expertise.
Depends on the dose, but
okay.
They're interesting books if people are interested on psychedelics, and there's a lot of information out there, and you should do it in a controlled way.
Yeah.
If you do it. I'm not advocating.
Yeah. Well, hey, if the data's so strong,
I am advocating for more research and controlled trials, because I think there is a huge amount of potential.
That's amazing. Should go back to a basic thing real quick, exercise. What type of exercise is ideal for longevity? High intensity interval training, strength, both?
Yeah, this is a minefield too. Let me start by saying that it's not just endurance or not just resistance. You need to be doing both.
Yeah.
And but I think that you can wade into that pool or go to the deep end, and it's a real challenge to figure out where to be. I like doing interval training personally, because I feel like it really improves my cardiovascular parameters and my endurance performance. And so I hate doing it, but I hate doing treadmills. So I like to run outside, and I also hate doing intervals. So now I realize that hate squared is not more than hate. So when I'm on a treadmill, I do intervals.
Yeah.
So,
there you go.
But when I'm outside, I run distance. So that works for me.
Are you doing like a 4x4 kind of situation?
I try different strategies. Okay. I try to do 4 or 5 minutes at a high speed, which, I run 8 to 9 minutes a mile when I'm doing like a 5K. So then when I try to elevate 10% above that or something for 4 minutes, and then I walk, at like a brisk walk, and just oscillate back and forth between those two. I'm not sure that's optimal. For me, I'm comfortable with it.
Okay.
I think comfort is really important with exercise. It has to be something you're comfortable with. Suboptimal that you do regularly is
Yeah.
better than optimal that you don't do.
Yes, absolutely.
The other thing with resistance training, I had never really gotten weight training lessons. And it's funny, I went to, started doing this about 5 years ago, and I've definitely added muscle mass doing it. Okay.
Great.
So it's good. But, I went to one of this high-level bodybuilder that has a fitness gym in Singapore. She came to one of our conferences, and she said, I want to figure out if we can work together, because even if you go to a fitness center, if you don't know how to do the training right, you're not optimizing.
Yeah.
Even the people that are training you there, if you hire a trainer, most of them don't know what they're doing. And so I'm like, all right, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll come to your center and do this. And so I've just started doing this, and
Nice.
it's like relearning. I'm not going to be in any bodybuilding competitions, and that's not my goal.
Yeah.
But
I don't know if bodybuilding competitions are optimal for longevity.
I am not sure either. That's but I think that when they looked at me, and they're not trying to do this for that. They're trying to take middle-aged people and get them strength that's going to help them maximize their benefit as they get older.
Good.
And so they look at me and they're saying, all right, you have muscle mass, but you're asymmetric, you're hunched over, you're not training the right muscles, and I focus on core, but they're saying you're still not training the right muscles. So they're like retraining me and like everything, like the low row thing, everything. They're like retraining how I do it, get the body right, move.
Nice.
Yeah. And I just started doing it, but already I can feel a difference. So I think that really going out and finding, if you really want to do it, finding real expertise, that people that know how to do it, is very important. You probably get benefit from doing it suboptimally as well, but it's worth learning. It's worth really becoming knowledgeable so you know what you're doing. I think that to maximize your benefit. And so I'll let you know, but it's we'll see if I'm straighter next year. You see?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, it's all these like little tweaks over time.
Yeah,
I feel.
But I think it's kind of fun, and I think I'm sure you feel that way
So
too.
fun.
It's fun to like learn about things and make changes and see benefits from it.
Yeah, it's I mean the best. Yeah. So, out of all the things we kind of discussed today, or anything new, I mean, what are you most excited about in the future of longevity?
I think what we're going to see in the next few years is that really strong validated evidence we can modify aging, and it may be small effects. Like we have a study coming out showing a very small effect with AKG, but it's good, solid study, right? And I think that's going to really help get more widespread use. I want to see all of medicine thinking about aging, not just a tiny little segment of it. And so that, I think that'll help. The other thing is biologic aging clocks like the one we're developing that can be put into a medical practice and understood by doctors and used to create actionable outcomes. I think that will help the field gain traction, hopefully. So, it's funny, 10 years ago, nobody was talking about aging, or maybe 15. And now there's this explosion, and I love working with the longevity clinics and everything. I think they're really, most of them are trying to really do cutting edge approaches to help people. There's some things some clinics are doing that I don't really support, but generally speaking, I'm supportive. How do we take that and put it into mainstream medical practice? I think that's the real challenge. Because I want to see the population numbers change. And I'm happy if people that can afford it have a big effect. That's great. But I want to see the population numbers change. And so I'm thinking about the things to get to that stage. I'm like, it's funny. I'm 59 now. So, I think of myself as immortal, not because I really believe I'm immortal. I just like the mindset it gives me. I don't worry about the future. I just, if I see something I want to do that's going to take 10 years to come to fruition, that's fine. I'll be here. I'm still researching in 10. Whether that's true or not is almost irrelevant. It's the mindset I get from it that I think is so beneficial.
And that's been proven out in research too, right?
I had to. I had, I've had a lot of things happen to me. I had a major birth defect that created a lot of surgeries.
Oh, wow.
Then I got in a car accident at 22 that also led to a bunch of surgeries and broke 14 bones and tore my nose off and all kinds of head-to-toe problems. So living through those things changes you, and not always for the worse. I think especially the car accident, it changed my mindset. I went from being more introverted and worried about things to like realizing that, I'm going to try to do what I want. If I fail at trying to do what I want, it's better than not trying to do what I want.
Yeah.
And as soon as I took that mindset, everything became easier. And over time, I've, had stressful periods that I've had to deal with. And, I may get sick tomorrow, who knows? But I think that what I've tried to do is find a path that I'm manage my stress, try to be healthy, try to enjoy life, work hard, but still enjoy life. And I'm getting better at it. Maybe I'm not great yet. So.
Well, I love that. We didn't talk too much about why did you move from, you obviously were at the Buck and then you went to Singapore. Yeah. What was the compelling
I think the mindset in Singapore toward healthy longevity is really good. Even when I was coming there, they were already saying, we're only going to have 4 workers for every retired person, or in 5 years, 2 workers for every retired person. 30% of the population is going to be over the age of 65. Wow. We're a small island. We can't just take more and more immigrants because we're running out of space. So what do we do about it? And the idea of keeping people healthy longer was in the mindset when I came in 2017. So I could move to a world-class research institution. In U.S. is always in the top 2 ratings in Asia for universities. That has great medical school, good clinical studies. I could take my research from preclinical to clinical, and also a government that's progressive-minded. Now, they're a bit risk averse at times. And so only now are they really committing a huge amount of money to sort of research on healthy longevity. But they have a new program called RAE 2030 where they're going to put 350 million Singapore dollars, equivalent about 300 million US, focusing specifically on aging and keeping people healthy. And not many governments are doing that. So it's a good place to be doing longevity research. It's a supportive environment. It's a small island, and so if you develop something, you could imagine it being instituted in a whole population and making Singapore sort of a model for keeping people healthy and functional as long as possible. So I'm happy to be a part of that. And also Singapore is a really nice place to live. It's super safe and great food. It's a good place to be.
Where do they land on the longevity spectrum or lifespan spectrum?
In terms of lifespan in Singapore, it's in the top 3. You can argue between
top 3?
Hong Kong, Japan, and Singapore, but lifespan life expectancy is already in the mid to higher 80s in Singapore, much higher than U.S.
Goodness,
and it comes back to having a good healthcare system. Something that the U.S. has a good healthcare system if you can afford it and you have insurance, right? But if you can't, you're in trouble. And Singapore has a good baseline. Everybody gets a certain level of healthcare, and it's not perfect. There are things I don't love about it, but generally speaking, it takes care of people, and they benefit from that. I think the diet's better in Singapore. It's better everywhere in Asia. It's probably better everywhere than the U.S.
Right. Yeah. Like the absolute worst, maybe. I don't even know.
It's not ideal in Singapore. There's certainly challenges in the diet, but it's healthier, and so, and the government cares about its population. I don't agree with everything any government does, including Singapore, but I do believe that they actually care about improving the health of their population. So that's a good place to start.
That's a great starting spot for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard that now nutrition is going to be taught in medical school, so maybe that's one step forward.
What about aging? It's like, how can the one thing that happens to everybody that walks through the doctor's office not be taught in medical school? It's incredible. It just shows you how slow things are to change. And it's a mindset issue. But trying to change curriculum in medical school is I'm not sure I want to die on that hill. It's hard.
Yeah.
I'm not an MD either. I'm a PhD. So
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But nutrition is a good start. But there should be like a whole course on aging, because
Of course.
it underlies all the pathology that you talk about in medical school, and it's still being ignored in most schools.
I mean, also from what I've heard, menopause is like not even discussed whatsoever. It's like, yes, this thing happens, but there's no education as to why or how or what or anything as it relates to it.
Things just become systemic and unmodifiable. The fact that we do sick care and not health care, that you can see how that developed, and at the times decisions were made, you can see why the decisions were made. But now we're in a place where we know it's not the right strategy.
Yeah.
Obviously, when I get sick, I want to be treated, but I'd rather not get sick.
Yeah.
and that's what we should be focusing on.
Yeah.
But once systems get entrenched, they're really hard to change. And you can talk about that from the perspective of the NIH or from insurance companies or hospitals or pharmaceutical companies. And all of these places are full of well-meaning people.
Yeah.
But the system is like set up so that it's not optimized to keep people healthy. And I guess one of us needs to be made king for a day, and we can fix it.
There you go. There was that recent woman that passed away who was, I believe a supercentenarian.
Oh yeah.
Did you was there anything interesting there that they found?
I didn't. I don't know which one you're talking about.
Okay.
The longest lived woman, of course, was Jean Calment, although there's a lot of controversy about that. But if you believe the birth record, she was 122.
Yeah.
And so generally the oldest lived person is somewhere between 116 to 119, and almost always women.
Yeah.
But I don't know the specific one you're referring to. I will tell you one story, though. I was in Nicaragua and just on vacation, some remote area, and one of the people there said, "Oh, well, you want to go horseback riding?" So I'm like, "Yeah, sure." They said there's a woman with a farm outside the little town we were in that has horses. We can go there, and they said she's American too. So we went there and we got on horses, and I'm riding with her, and she's saying, "Oh, what do you work on?" I tell her aging, and generally, when you tell somebody you work on aging, they always say, "People in my family live forever." My grandfather was 88, and sometimes I don't tell them I do that for that reason. Yeah. Anyway, she said, "No, there's a man in a little village, one of the farmers, that's 105, and you want to go say hello to him?" And I'm like, this is highly unlikely, right?
Yeah.
I'm not even sure there's any 105-year-old male in Nicaragua right now. And on top of that, the fact that I would be next to them is very, very unlikely. But I'm like, sure. So, we go to his house, and it's like one of those Westerns. You get off the horse and you throw the rope over the little wooden log, and we walk into the house, and he was on a bed, and he was couldn't see well or hear that well. And she walked up to him and said hello, and he took her hand, and he's like, "Oh, the gringo," because she has big hands.
Oh.
So I started talking to him, and I'm asking him questions that, to what I know, to see if his answers are consistent with being 105. But I don't know my Nicaraguan history that well. So, but anyway, the questions I was asking, he was giving answers that were very consistent with that. And he was very clear-headed, actually. And so finally I said, "That's possible. Maybe he is 105. And so I said, "So what's your secret to being the 105? And he's like, "Wife 38 years younger."
Oh, wow. That was...
So I don't know if that's I'm not advocating that behavior.
I mean, that's interesting. So did you land on, you think he's 105 or?
I wasn't in a position where I'd have to go back and get medical records. And,
exactly.
In countries like that, especially at that age, it's really difficult. Even in China, I was one of the editors in chief of Aging Cell for a number of years. And so we're publishing papers on aging. When they did studies on centenarians in China, it was a challenge because, when they didn't go to modern calendars
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
until 40s maybe. So people
Wow.
that were born before that, they were using Chinese calendars, and we had to hire experts to like look at the birth records to even get a
Goodness.
good estimate on when people were born. And that China has better records than Nicaragua. So, it gets hard to really validate people's ages. So,
Well, the whole blue zones thing kind
yeah.
of, did that like fall apart a little bit, or?
I think that some of the data is more aspirational than real. I do believe Okinawa was a blue zone, and it was really an interesting one because that was the poorest prefecture in Japan, and yet it had longest lifespan. That's extremely rare. Usually the wealth is associated with longevity.
The zip code could determine your longevity, right?
Like in the U.S.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. Of course, the current generation of people in Okinawa are not long-lived anymore, and so there were behaviors. A lot of American military bases and influence and stuff doesn't help, but it's also not a wealthy prefecture, and so but there were definitely traits and behavioral traits in the older population that suggest that they were doing things that made them live longer. So that research is really interesting. Some of the other zones, certainly people lived long in those zones. Whether they live clearly longer than people around them is more debatable. And then what they're actually doing that makes them live long, I think, is still a little bit unclear. So it's easy to jump to conclusions, Mediterranean diet, but people in that whole region eat that diet, The social connectivity and the people in California because of the religion, those are plausible explanations. And in many cases, I'm not convinced that's the only reason or the real reason. So
well, in Loma Linda too, I think they're not drinking alcohol. They're not doing so many things that it's probably hard to really.
And I think the overall effect of alcohol is bad because too many people are drinking too much. Whether there's a modest benefit for some people drinking a low amount is a different question. But the population size effect is probably bad because the negatives in people drinking too much are really high.
Yeah. What would be the positives? Because it was thought to be like resveratrol or something, but then obviously
no, it's not. I've never believed resveratrol because you can't get enough resveratrol.
Yeah, you'd be like almost
And
dead.
also, we published a paper that said that resveratrol doesn't activate SIRT1. So I have a long history of arguing with people on that. It may be beneficial. I just don't think it's through Sirtuins. But anyway, you're not getting. There are a lot of different kinds of polyphenols, by the way. And so when you drink wine, you're getting many different kinds of polyphenols in very low doses. Ethanol is good for you for your cardiovascular system. I still believe that to be true. What I tell people, and everybody has an opinion on this, and you can cite data supporting or arguing against a lot of different things. My belief is that low dose of ethanol consumption is probably beneficial or not harmful for people that don't have addictive behaviors, don't have breast cancer, prostate cancer risk, and that can manage it. But a lot of people fall outside of that category, and if you fall into those other parameters, you probably shouldn't be drinking at all.
What do you define as low intake or
1 to 2 drinks a day?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And not binge drinking. That doesn't mean 10 drinks once a week.
Yeah, stacking them all.
All binge drinking is, you can just look at your HRV if you don't believe binge drinking is bad.
Oh, goodness.
Goes through, if I drink too much in a day, my HRV is goes
plummet. Well, sleep score too, right?
Yeah, everything plummets.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but, there's so many people that have, reasons for their opinions that alcohol is either bad or good, that I have a hard time parsing through all the data, and every 5 years it goes back and forth. So it's the other thing I should say is that alcohol's calories, and it's pretty meaningless calories. So that's another thing. If you're overweight, have metabolic issues, you're throwing in a lot of calories, from a glass, even any kind of alcohol, basically.
Yeah.
Even ethanol is a source of calories, directly. So it gets converted to energy at some rate.
And why is ethanol good for cardiovascular health, or could be
I
good?
don't think it's entirely clear. There's some data that's there's a lot of data that's epidemiological that says it's beneficial.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you say if you or tell us about your day? Like if someone wanted to have like a longevity day, how would they do that?
My day. I have no pattern to my day. It's like,
Okay. What could a longevity?
when I'm in Singapore and not traveling, especially like on a weekend where I don't have meetings all day long. And the big problem with Singapore too is that I have a lot of collaborations with people in US and Europe. So I'm up at 2 a.m. and stuff a lot.
Yeah, that's
meetings.
tough.
But I'm not an early morning person.
Okay.
I know people love getting up and exercising early. I can't get past the coffee. And then when I have the coffee, I need an hour or two before I can really do serious endurance exercise anyway. But I try not to eat much during the day. And, I'm not religious about it. I'll have coffee and, I may have a small amount of food in the morning, but very small. And then I have a larger meal later in the day.
What's later in the day?
I eat pretty late, like 7 or 8. I know.
Okay.
Don't tell me.
I'm done eating by 4.
Yeah. I eat a lot of I drink a lot of coffee. I don't see the data on coffee is pretty good, I think. If it's not keeping you awake at night and it's not, you don't have certain kinds of cardiovascular problems, I think coffee's probably the more the merrier. That's what the data suggests anyway.
Yeah. Do you try to do like, lab tested coffee or anything like that, or like,
Yeah, I'm not that picky.
Organic, biodynamic, anything like that?
I get organic stuff when I can, but I'm not that picky about it.
Okay.
I try to eat diverse, and that's easy to do in Singapore because there's 20 different kinds of ethnic food you can get at any given time. Some's healthier than others, but I try to eat very broad and diverse and try to balance my micronutrients. I try to do some form of exercise every day. I mix endurance and resistance training, but at least something every day. Even if it's 20 minutes, something.
Yeah.
I'm focusing more. I'm really bad. I realized that somebody took a video of me hitting a golf ball, and I strength-wise, I'm pretty close to where I was when I was young, and endurance-wise, maybe even better because I do a lot more effort now.
Yeah.
But I realized that, wow, I look like an old man. I have no flexibility. So now I'm going back and working on flexibility, and balance, and things like that.
Mobility, things like that, yeah.
So that's something you can do at home, like you have one of those balance balls and things like that. They're simple things you can do.
Yeah.
And then, but I like unpredictability. I don't like a routine. And I know that may not be the healthiest thing, but I like that in my life, by the way. I don't want to know what I'm doing 6 months from now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, definitely the bones are there. It's so funny because we kind of have like some opposites. Like I'm in bed at the same time every day, and then I'm done eating at a specific time. Do you have any thoughts on, so I do a test called the micronutrient test. I do it like 4 times per year. And that's how I determine my supplementation for the most part.
That's interesting. I haven't tried that. No, I should do that. You should tell me that, where to get that.
Yeah, you should do that. Because I'm curious. I mean, I think it'd be safe to assume if you're running, not micronutrient deficiencies, but insufficiencies for long periods of time, that probably wouldn't be.
I measure things pretty regularly. I just haven't done that test because whenever I go to a longevity clinic and work with them, I tell them, put me through whatever you do.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Because I partly selfishly, but also mainly because I want to see what they're doing. And I think if you see it from a client perspective, it's different than if you just get a list of, get a booklet about what they do. I think that's less meaningful. If you actually go through it, you learn things, and different clinics do different things. One of them recently, they did a rectal ultrasound. I'm like, I'll be happy if I don't get that again.
Yeah. Well, is that like a colonoscopy kind of thing? Oh, okay. Interesting.
But there are other ways to do that.
Yeah.
Like, okay. But So anyway, I'm pretty well tested.
Yeah. Yeah, I do it with I mean, I've done both Vibrant America and Genova, but I like it because it'll look at cellular and serum, so it kind of gives you an idea, like, are you burning through more nutrients? Are you getting enough from your diet?
Yeah.
And then I will amend the supplementation or food. I try to do food first. So like I think last test I was a little low on vitamin C, so I introduced some more citrus fruits, but also did
I think that's good. By the way, I think one thing that's low-hanging fruit that we do not pay attention to generally is vitamins and minerals. Again, it's a part of the industry, right? People want to sell pills.
Yeah.
They want you to take a multivitamin. What we should be doing is optimizing our vitamin levels, not just taking random vitamins.
Yeah.
I think I would bet that if you could optimize vitamin levels, just that, you would enhance your health span by 5 to 10 years. But we argue about what optimal range is. And companies that sell vitamins don't want to measure in people and optimize. They just want to. It's easier to sell pills.
Yeah.
And so I that would be something I would change. It's like, let's pay serious attention to these vitamins and also other micronutrients and say, let's get this right. Particularly B complex, by the way. We continually see people that are low in B complex. By biomarkers, they appear to be aging more quickly. So that's something I would pay a lot of attention to.
I mean, I would guess if you did a micronutrient test right now on, almost any just average individual, it would be a complete disaster. It would be low on everything. You know what I mean?
A lot of things, certainly. Yeah.
Most things, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because the number one consumed vegetable here is like potato chips or whatever. Like in fries or something. It's absolutely crazy.
I grew up eating a lot of fast food, and
Me too.
I have to I'm still addicted to it. I have to, when I drive by, I have to I'm not turning.
Oh my gosh. See, I see it as poison. So I zoom past.
Yeah,
I'm that is not even to me, that's not even food anymore.
Yeah, I
it's
pretty much don't eat it, but I still crave it. It's like I still fight it. And potato chips too. It's like, I don't let them in my house. I won't say I never eat them, but it might be twice a year, but they don't come in the house.
Well, I feel like I forgot what a lot of things taste like.
Yeah,
and I want to keep it like that. People are always like, oh, just have a tiny bit. I'm like, why would I have a tiny bit of that food that has been engineered to be hyper palatable and then I'll crave it later? Right now I don't crave it because I don't remember what this stuff tastes like.
Yeah, I agree. A simple example of that is like people that switch from Coke to Diet Coke. When they first start drinking Diet Coke, it tastes awful. They don't want it. Like 3 months after you probably don't drink either, I know, but bear with me.
Yes.
3 months after you've switched to Diet Coke, the regular Coke tastes way too sweet, right? Because you've recalibrated your taste.
And, it's such a real thing. I mean, to me, like a sweet treat is, a handful of blueberries or some cherries or something like that.
I almost quit eating very sweet things too.
Yeah.
And I've stopped many years ago. I stopped. And growing up, we added salt to everything. I quit doing that, and then flavors came out. It's like I don't even think of adding salt to things now. So it's I'm trying to make. I'm not as good at diet as you are, I'm sure, but I'm trying to make changes that, and I can see that I'm adapting to it, and I eat a lot more vegetables than I used to. And also, growing up, I grew up in Kentucky. It's like they could take any healthy food and make it unhealthy.
Right. Yeah.
Take okra, you bread it and fry it.
My grandma would take a tomato and fry it, and then I'm like, why did we do that?
Where'd you grow up?
Ohio.
Oh yeah, I was in Louisville, so
okay,
not too far away.
Probably not too different of a mindset either.
7-layer salad land.
Yep, exactly. So, but I feel like I was able to overcome a lot of that. I mean, I was on a lot of antibiotics as a kid and all that sorts of stuff. And we now know that what it can do to the gut microbiome. And but by really following these regimens and having a lot of testing, I've pretty much seemed to remedy it. So
I have to eat a very different diet too, because my colon didn't develop. That's the birth defect I had. So I have to be careful with fiber.
Okay, yeah.
Too much fiber makes it feel like I swallowed a soccer ball. So I have to. My ideal diet's a little different, I think, than most people. But I try to get as much fiber as I can that doesn't make me feel miserable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, fiber in general is another one that is so, unconsumed here. It's like crazy.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
And
well, is there anything else that you think people should know about longevity or
no, I don't
where
know.
we're
Just
going?
leave people with the message that the time to take action is now, and you can be conservative or you can be on the edge, but doing nothing is harming yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, typically at the end, I ask people, where can we find you? But do you have social media?
Yeah, I
Ryan?
do have social
Okay.
media.
Do you post anything on it? I followed
We
you, by the
post,
way.
but not that much. So
Okay, wait, maybe so. I need to make sure I'm following the right one.
yeah, we'll get connected, and but I'm
Okay.
on LinkedIn, and I know that's like archaic.
Do you want to drop a website or anything where people
We
can
have a
learn about your work?
website for our healthy longevity program, and we also have a new website for our consulting company, Live Beyond, and it has a lot of growing amount of information on aging on it.
Okay.
So you can just go to livebeyond.ai for that.
Okay, amazing. Well, we'll make sure to include that all in the show notes. And when we get more info, especially anything on ovarian aging, I'm really excited about
Yeah,
that.
sure.
So
Happy
please.
to talk about that. We'll have that paper will be coming out in the near future, and I don't know if you've had Yushin on yet, but you should.
I really want to. If you
you
can
should.
put in a good word for me, I would love
Yeah,
that. Thank
yeah.
you so much for being here with
Sure,
me today.
I'm happy to do it anytime.